Tonight, we are going to walk through the parts of Hogwarts that the books left out. You already know the warm version of the castle. You know the moving staircases and the 4 long tables in the Great Hall, the candles that float beneath a ceiling charmed to look like the sky. You know the feasts, the house points counted in glittering hourglasses, the common rooms with their fires banked low against the cold. That is the castle as it was shown to children. It smells of pumpkin and wax and old parchment, and it was always meant to feel safe. We are not staying there tonight. We are going lower and older, into the corners the stories tended to step around, the dungeons that run deeper than any first year ever sees, the forest the school keeps at arm's length, the rooms that only appear when no one wants them to be found, and the rooms that were sealed precisely because someone did. There is a great deal about this castle that the well-lit version never mentioned, and most of it has been waiting a very long time to be told. I will keep my voice quiet the whole way through. The point of tonight is not to keep you awake. The point is to let you drift, slowly, the way you drift off in a moving carriage, when the road is long and you have nowhere you need to be. So settle in. Find the comfortable position, the one where your shoulders finally drop. Let your breathing slow. The castle has held these secrets for 1,000 years. It is in no hurry, neither are we. If you have been falling asleep here with me for a while now, leave a comment and tell me how many nights in a row it has been. If tonight is your first night, you only need to write 2 words. Night 1, that is all. I do read them, and there is a particular kind of quiet pleasure in watching the same names come back, evening after evening, like windows lighting up one by one in a building you walk past every night. That is the only thing I will ask of you. Now let the torches along the corridor burn down to a low amber glow, and we will begin where the castle itself begins, at the bottom, in the stone. Most people who hear about Hogwarts picture a building, a very large, very old building, full of strange rooms and stranger furniture, but a building all the same. Something made of stone and timber that sits where it was put and does as buildings do, which is nothing at all. That is the first thing the books let you assume, and it is wrong. Hogwarts is not inert. It has never been inert. The witch or wizard who first set its foundation stones did not build a school so much as wake something, and then teach it to keep students. Over 1,000 years, the castle has become so saturated with magic that it has crossed a line very few structures ever cross. It notices, it responds, it has preferences, and on rare occasions it has moods. And the people who have lived inside it longest will tell you, if you can get them to speak plainly, that the safest way to think of Hogwarts is as a thing that is awake. Consider the staircases. You have heard them described as a charming inconvenience. 142 of them, shifting and swinging from one landing to another, so that a student on the way to class might suddenly find the steps, carrying them somewhere they never intended to go. Cheerful version says the castle does this to be playful. The truth is closer to the behavior of an animal that has learned the rhythms of the people who feed it. The staircases do not move at random. They move with purpose, and the purpose is not always one a student would choose. There are steps that vanish underfoot at the same place every Friday. There are landings that can only be reached at certain hours, and others that simply stop existing for a week at a time, the doorway sealing over into blank wall as though it had never been cut. A castle that does this is not malfunctioning, it is deciding. Then there is the matter of getting in and out, which is far harder than the stories let on. You cannot apparate inside the grounds. You cannot slip from one room to another by magic, not in the ordinary way, because the founders wove protection into the foundations so dense and so old that the whole space resists being crossed by anything but feet and stairs and the castle's own permission. This is usually explained as a security measure, and so it is. What gets left out is how total it is. The wards do not simply keep enemies from appearing in the corridors. They watch the boundary of the land like a held breath. They know when something has crossed the lake, then They know when a thing that should not be there is standing in the trees at the edge of the forest, looking up at the lit windows. Castle has been keeping that watch since before the oldest names in any wizarding family were born, and it has not blinked once. The walls remember things. This is not a figure of speech. The portraits remember, of course, hundreds of painted figures who can step out of their frames and pass news from one end of the castle to the other faster than any living messenger. The suits of armor remember, standing in their alcoves with their visors down, holding ground they have held for centuries. But the stone itself remembers too, in a slower and heavier way. There are corridors where the temperature drops for no reason a draft could explain. Places where something terrible happened so long ago that no living person recalls the event. And yet the cold has stayed, soaked into the masonry like damp. Students learn to walk a little faster through those stretches, without ever quite knowing why. The founders understood what they were making. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin did not lay these foundations in a single season. They chose the site with care, on high ground above a deep cold lake, far from the nearest village, in a part of the country where the old magic ran close to the surface, and the land had a reputation even then for being more than it seemed. They built slowly. They built rooms into the design that the others did not know about, each founder reluctant to give up the last of their privacy, even to the people they trusted most. By the time the four of them had finished, Castle held more hidden space than open space, and not one of them held the full map of it in their head. That alone should tell you something, that four of the most gifted magical minds of their age worked together for years, and even they could not say with certainty everything the building contained. What they did agree on was the protection. Whatever quarrels came later, and there were bitter ones, the four founders were united on the question of defense. They had lived through an age when a child showing signs of magic might be drowned or burned by terrified neighbours, and they meant for this place to be the one piece of ground in the country where such a child would be wholly, completely safe. So they did not stop at thick walls and a remote location. They built the safety into the magic of the place until the castle could defend itself. There is a reason that in the worst hour the school ever faced, a single command could wake the suits of armor and send the stone gargoyles and statues marching down to fight. That capacity was always there, asleep in the walls, waiting for someone with the authority to call it up. Castle was made to be roused. Most generations of students simply never saw it happen, and went their whole lives believing the armor was decoration. The grounds tell the same story if you read them slowly. The lawns sweep down toward the lake, gentle and green, and they look as ordinary as any country estate. But the smoothness is deceptive. The flat ground was made flat. Out beyond the manicured edge, where the lawn gives way to the dark line of the forest, you can see what the land wants to be when no one is shaping it, and what it wants is wild. The forest presses against the boundary of the grounds, the way the sea presses against a wall. The school does not own the forest so much as hold a line against it, and that line has to be maintained. We will come back to the forest later, because there is a great deal living in it that the books only ever mentioned in passing. For now it is enough to notice the shape of the thing, bright, tended island of safety, and all around it, held back by old magic and nothing else, the dark. There is one more piece of the castle's awareness worth sitting with before we go down into the dungeons, and it is the strangest of all. Hogwarts hides rooms from the people inside it, and it reveals them only when it decides the moment is right. Most students go their entire 7 years and never find a door that was not on a teacher's map. But the door is there. There are corridors that are longer on some nights than on others. There are rooms that have stood empty for so long that the dust has gone to felt, full of objects abandoned by people now centuries dead, and the castle simply keeps them, the way an old house keeps the things left in its attic, except this house chooses who is allowed to climb the stairs. Picture the building at 3 in the morning, when the students are asleep, and the fires have died to embers, and even the portraits have nodded off in their frames. The corridors are not empty, the staircases shift in the dark, slow and deliberate, moving to wherever they will be wanted by morning. Somewhere a door that did not exist at dinner has appeared in a blank wall. Somewhere else a door that was there yesterday has closed itself over with stone, without a sound. The whole vast structure breathes in the dark, settling, remembering, keeping its long watch over the sleeping children it was built to protect. That is the castle as it truly is, a guardian made of stone, very old, very patient, and never entirely asleep. And tonight, while you drift, it is keeping watch over you too. Every great house has a cellar, and the older the house, the more the cellar tends to hold. Hogwarts has more below the ground than most people standing in its bright upper halls ever quite let themselves think about. The dungeons go down, and then they go further down, into cold stone passages, where the torches gutter in air that never fully warms, and somewhere in that downward dark is the oldest and worst of the school's secrets, sealed away by one of the 4 hands that built the place. Dungeons themselves are no secret. The potions classroom is down there, and the Slytherin common room, set beneath the surface of the lake, so that the light coming through the windows is the green, that shifting light of deep water, with the shapes of creatures passing on the other side of the glass. Students go down to the dungeons for lessons every week and think nothing of it. The cold is just the cold, the dark is just the dark. They learn to read by torchlight and to keep their cloaks on, and the lower passages, the ones that lead away from the classrooms into parts of the foundation no lesson ever requires, they leave alone. Those passages are not on any timetable. They simply continue down past the rooms anyone uses, into a silence that has not been disturbed in a very long time. What the books told you about the Chamber of Secrets is the short version. Salazar Slytherin, the founder who came to believe that magical children of non-magical parents should never have been admitted at all, fell out with the other 3 over exactly that question. He wanted the doors of the school closed to anyone he considered impure. The others refused. The argument grew until it could not be mended, and Slytherin left the school he had helped to raise. That much is common knowledge, part that matters. The part that turns an old academic quarrel into something that would nearly destroy the school twice over is what he did before he walked out. He built a chamber. He hid it so far down in the foundations that the other 3 founders, who knew the castle better than anyone alive, never found it. And inside that chamber he left a monster. Sit with the patience of that for a moment, because the patience is the horror of it. Slytherin did not loose a creature on the school in his own lifetime, where he could have watched it work. He left it sleeping, sealed away, and he set the lock so that only his own true heir, generations down the bloodline, that would ever be able to open the chamber and wake the thing inside. He was building a weapon meant to go off long after his own death. He was trusting that somewhere down the centuries a descendant of his would carry both his blood and his hatred, and would come to this castle, and would find the way in, and would finish the purge he had begun. He poisoned the future, and then he left, and he let the future come find the poison on its own. The monster was a basilisk, a serpent of impossible size, grown over centuries in the dark, with venom that can kill in moments, and a gaze that kills outright, so that to meet its eyes directly is to die where you stand. A creature like this does not need to be fed often, and it does not age the way ordinary animals do, can sleep for hundreds of years and wake as deadly as the day it was born. So the basilisk slept, coiled in the dark beneath a school full of children, while above it generation after generation of students sat their exams and ate their feasts and grew up and left, none of them knowing that the floor they walked on was the lid of a tomb that was not quite a tomb, because the thing inside it was still alive. The first time the chamber opened, in the version most people half remember, a girl died. Her name was Myrtle, and she was an ordinary student, unhappy in the way that ordinary students sometimes are, crying alone in a bathroom on an upper floor when something came up through the pipes and looked at her. She died without ever understanding what she had seen. And here is the detail that the cheerful histories tend to fold away into a footnote, because it is genuinely grim. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, the way down to a monster that could kill with a glance, was hidden inside that bathroom. The serpent did not have to travel far at all. It rose up through the plumbing of the school, the same plumbing that carried water to every floor. And that is the thing the students were never told. Chamber was not some far-off vault sealed away from daily life. Its doorway opened onto a room children used every single day, and its monster could travel the pipes to almost anywhere in the building, because a castle full of running water is a castle full of roads if you are a serpent large enough and old enough to use them. A boy was blamed for Myrtle's death. He was large and awkward and kept creatures that frightened people, and so he was an easy target and the real heir of Slytherin. The clever, charming student who had actually opened the chamber made sure the blame fell on him. The boy was expelled. His wand was snapped. He was allowed to stay on at the castle only through the mercy of one teacher who did not believe the official story, and he lived the rest of his long life under the shadow of a crime he did not commit, while the student who had truly opened the chamber went on to become the most feared dark wizard the world had ever known. That student's name, before he chose a different one, was Tom Riddle. He was Slytherin's heir, arriving exactly as Slytherin had gambled that he would, centuries late and full of the right hatred, and he opened the chamber to see what his ancestor had left him. Then he closed it again and waited, and the basilisk went back to sleep for another 50 years. When the chamber opened a second time, the school came within a hair of being shut down for good. Students were found frozen, petrified, their bodies stiff and cold and staring, saved from death only by chance, because each of them had seen the basilisk's eyes secondhand, through a reflection, or through water, or through the lens of a camera, rather than directly. Had any one of them met that gaze head-on, they would have died, and the school would almost certainly have closed its doors. The teachers were frightened. The parents were terrified. And the worst part is how blind they all were to what was actually loose in the school, because the official records insisted the Chamber of Secrets was a legend, a story told to frighten first years, with no more truth in it than the things children scare each other with after dark. The danger had a doorway in a bathroom and a body in the pipes, and the people responsible for protecting the children spent weeks insisting it could not possibly be real. It took a 12-year-old to go down into the chamber and end it. Down past the bathroom, down through the pipe that the serpent itself had used. Touche. Strewn with the small bones of creatures the basilisk had eaten on its way up and down over the years, finally into the chamber itself. A vast underground hall, its ceiling lost in darkness, lined with towering stone serpents, with a great carved face of Salazar Slytherin at the far end, the founder's stone mouth, the very gate the monster slept behind. That is where it had been the whole time, directly beneath the school, beneath the lake, beneath the dungeons, beneath the feet of every child who had ever crossed the entrance hall, in a chamber so deep and so well hidden that for 1,000 years almost no one knew for certain it was there. The basilisk was killed that night, run through with a sword, and the immediate danger ended, but the chamber is still there. It was never filled in. It cannot be reached by any student who does not have the particular gift Slytherin's line possessed, the ability to speak to serpents, and so for the most part it simply waits, empty now of its monster but not of its meaning, a vast cold hall sealed beneath the school, holding the memory of what one founder's hatred was willing to do to children who had not yet been born. That. There is a thought that tends to come to people late at night, once they understand all of this, and it is not a comfortable one, so let it come to you gently here in the dark where it cannot hurt you. For nearly 1,000 years, Every student who slept in that castle slept above a sleeping monster. They did not know. They could not have known. They grew up and fell in love and sat their exams and went home for the summer, with the serpent coiled in the dark beneath their dormitories. The entire time, the castle knew. The castle always knew. It is part of what the old building has been keeping watch over all these centuries. One more secret sealed into the stone, held close and quiet while the children slept on, exactly as they are sleeping now. Dungeons are cold tonight, the way they are always cold. The torches burn low, far below the lowest passage anyone uses. Great chamber lies empty and silent in the dark, and the carved stone face of the founder keeps its mouth shut, as it has kept it shut through all but a handful of nights in 1,000 years. There is nothing down there now to fear. The monster is long gone. Cold remains, soaked into the deep stone, and the quiet remains, and the castle goes on holding the place the way it holds all its oldest secrets, with patience and with care, and without ever once letting go. At the edge of the grounds, past the last of the tended lawn, the trees begin. They are called the Forbidden Forest, and the name is not decoration. It is a rule, and the rule is old, and behind the rule is the simple fact that the castle does not control what lives in those trees. The school holds a line at the edge of the forest, the way a lamp holds back the dark in a single room of a large house. Step past the line, and you are no longer on ground the castles keep safe. You are on ground that was here before the castle, and will be here after it, and does not particularly care that a school was built next door. The students are told to stay out, and most of them do. A few wander in, because students will, and the forest teaches them quickly why the rule exists. The light changes the moment you pass under the canopy, temperature drops, sound behaves strangely, so that something moving close by can seem far off, and something far away can seem to be standing just behind your shoulder. The paths are not really paths, they open and close depending on what is using them, and a route that led you in clearly will often refuse to lead you out the same way. People have gone into that forest and not come back. The school does not advertise this, but it is true, and it has been true for 1,000 years. What lives in there is the part the books only ever showed you in glimpses, one creature at a time, when the plot required it. Taken together, picture is far stranger and far darker than any single glimpse suggested. The forest is not a backdrop with a few monsters in it, is a whole world, layered and old, with its own nations and its own laws, and the school exists on the edge of it as an uneasy neighbour rather than a master. Begin with the Centaurs, because they are the closest thing the forest has to a ruling people, and because the books were careful never to let you see how little they think of us. A centaur is not a horse with a human attached, however much that is the first thing the eye reports. They are a proud and ancient people with a deep knowledge of the movements of the stars, and they read the future in those movements, the way a sailor reads weather in the sky. They have lived in that forest since long before the founders chose the site, and they regard the whole of it as theirs. They tolerate the school. They do not respect it. To a centaur, the business of human witches and wizards is a small and noisy thing, beneath the notice of beings who measure events in the turning of the heavens, rather than the span of a single short human life. They have rules about contact with humans, and those rules are strict, and a centaur who breaks them by helping a human too directly can be cast out by the rest of the herd. When a human wanders too far into their territory, the centaurs do not always escort them gently back to the edge. There was an occasion, late in the school's history, when a cruel official from the ministry pushed her way into the forest and insulted them to their faces, and the centaurs carried her off into the trees. She came back changed, and she would not speak of what had happened, and she flinched at the sound of hooves for a long time afterward. The forest had made its point. This is our ground. You came onto it uninvited. Be grateful you came back at all. Deeper in, away from the centaur's territory, there was for many years a colony of giant spiders, The first of them was brought to the castle as a small thing, an egg smuggled in by the same boy, who was later blamed for Myrtle's death, and when that boy was expelled, the creature was released into the forest rather than killed. It survived, it grew, and over the decades it bred, until there was an entire nest of them living in the heart of the trees. Spiders the size of cart horses, hundreds of them, with a hunger that the forest's ordinary prey could not always satisfy. The colony kept a kind of truce with the boy who had raised their founder, out of loyalty to him alone. That loyalty did not extend to anyone else. Any other human who stumbled into that part of the forest was simply food, and the colony made no secret of it. For most of the school's recent history, there was a region of the forest, not very far from the castle at all, where to set foot was to be swarmed and eaten, and the only thing standing between the students and that fate was the rule that kept them out, and the line of magic that the spiders, for their own reasons, mostly chose not to cross. There are gentler things in the forest too, though even the gentle things carry a weight of darkness with them. Unicorns live in the deep groves, and a unicorn is a creature of such purity that its blood can keep a dying person alive. But the blood can only be taken by killing the unicorn, and to slay something that innocent for your own survival is a crime so foul that it half kills the soul of whoever commits it. Tat. There was a time when something was moving through the forest at night, hunting the unicorns, drinking their silver blood from the wounds, and the sight of one of those slain creatures lying broken in a clearing, its blood pooled bright against the dark leaves, is one of the most disturbing images the whole history of the school contains. Pure things are killed in that forest by things that have given up everything to keep living. The students were told to stay out for their safety. They were not told what their safety was protecting them from. And then there are the Thestrals, which the book saved for last and never fully explained. Thestrals are the creatures that pull the carriages from the station up to the castle each year, and to most students the carriages appear to pull themselves, gliding up the road with nothing in the harness. That is because Thustrals are invisible to anyone who has not watched a person die. Only those who have seen death with their own eyes can see them, and once you can see them, you cannot stop. They are dark, leathery, skeletal things with great wings, gentle by nature, drawn to blood, and they live in a herd in the depths of the forest. There is something devastating in the design of them. Child arrives at the castle for the first time, climbs into a carriage, and sees nothing pulling it, 'cause that child has been lucky enough that death has not yet touched their life. And another child, who has lost someone, who has watched the light go out of a face they loved, climbs into the same carriage and sees the creatures plainly, and understands at once that they are now a different kind of person from the friend beside them. The forest keeps the Thestrals, and the Thestrals keep that hard truth. And the carriages roll up to the bright castle every September carrying children who can see, and children who cannot, sorted not by house but by grief. The forest holds more than this. There are pools where the water is wrong. There are clearings where the trees lean inward as though listening. Deeper still are things the centaurs themselves give a wide berth, which is a thought worth resting on, because if the oldest and proudest people of the forest will not go to a certain place, then that place is old indeed. The school does not map the forest. No one has ever mapped it fully. It changes, the way the castle changes, and it keeps its own counsel. And the line of magic at its edge holds because the founders made it hold, and because, on the whole, the things in the trees would rather stay among the trees. Tonight the forest is dark and quiet under the stars. The centaurs are forever reading. Somewhere in the deep groves a herd of Thestrals folds its great wings and settles to rest. The spiders are gone now, the colony broken up in the end, but the trees remember them, the way the trees remember everything. And at the edge, where the lawn gives way to the first dark trunks, the old line holds, as it has held for 1,000 years, keeping the wild world on its own side of the boundary, while the castle keeps its watch on hours. You're on the safe side tonight. The lamp is lit. The dark is held back. Let it stay out there in the trees where it belongs and rest. Somewhere on the 7th floor of the castle, across from a faded old painting of a man in robes trying to teach a group of unwilling trolls to dance, there is a stretch of blank wall. Students pass it every day without a second look. There is nothing to see. Bare stone, a torch bracket, the worn floor of a corridor that leads onto other corridors. And yet behind that blank wall is one of the most extraordinary spaces in the entire castle, a room that is not always there, that becomes whatever the person who needs it most requires, and that has been slowly absorbing the secrets of the school for 1,000 years. It is called the Room of Requirement. The way it works is simple to describe and very strange to live with. If you walk past that stretch of wall 3 times, concentrating with all your might on what you need, a door will appear. Open it, and inside you will find the room arranged precisely for your purpose. If you need a place to hide, it becomes a hiding place. If you need a quiet space to practice, it becomes a practice hall, equipped with everything the practice requires. It has even been known to provide a bathroom for a student caught short in the middle of the night. The room reads the need and answers it, and when you leave, it folds itself away again into blank wall, waiting for the next person whose need is great enough to call it back. That alone is remarkable. But it is the room's other shape, the shape it takes when someone needs to hide a thing rather than to use a space, turns it into something close to a confession written in stone. When a person walks that stretch of corridor, wishing only for somewhere to hide, an object somewhere no one will ever find it, the room opens onto a hall of enormous size, and that hall is not empty, it is full. It is packed to the high ceiling with the hidden things of 1,000 years of students and teachers, piled in towering, leaning stacks that run off into the distance in every direction, a city of abandoned objects, broken furniture, and forgotten books and bottles of dried up potions and cages and crates, and old detention records and contraband seized and stashed and never reclaimed. Every person across 10 centuries who ever crept up to that wall wanting to hide something forbidden, something stolen, something shameful, something dangerous, was sent into the same room, and each of them added their object to the pile, and not one of them realized that they were standing in the accumulated guilt of every student who had come before. Then they thought they were alone with their secret. They were standing in a hall, stacked to the rafters with everyone else's. Think about what that means as a record of the school. The bright histories of Hogwarts are written in trophy cases and house cups, and the names of head students carved into wood. The true history, the unedited one, is in that room. Every cheat, every theft, every dangerous experiment, every dark object a frightened child smuggled in, and then could not bring themselves to destroy, every love letter too humiliating to keep and too precious to burn. All of it is in there, layered up over centuries. Dust gone soft as felt over the oldest stacks. No one curated it, no one chose what went in. The room simply took whatever was brought to it and kept it, without judgment and without limit. And the result is the most honest archive the castle owns. An archive of everything the school's own people wanted to make disappear. It was in that hall of hidden things, somewhere among the 1,000-year pile, that one of the darkest objects in the world lay hidden for years. The student who had once opened the Chamber of Secrets, the boy named Tom Riddle who became something far worse, had returned to the castle as a young man, and walked that corridor 3 times wishing for a place to hide a piece of his own broken soul. He left it there, tucked among the abandoned junk of generations, trusting that no one would ever find a single small object in a hall that size, and he was very nearly right. It sat there for decades, a fragment of the most dangerous wizard alive, hidden in plain sight inside the school's own great hoard of shame, while students walked past the blank wall on the 7th floor and felt nothing at all. The room has one more secret, and it is the one that finally turned it from a curiosity into a wound. Among the objects abandoned in that great hall, At some point, someone left a cabinet. A tall, dark, upright cabinet, the kind a person might step into. It did not work properly when it was left there. It was broken, and being broken, it had been hidden away and forgotten like everything else. But that cabinet was one of a matched pair, and its twin stood in a shop in a dark corner of the wizarding world, far from the castle. A working pair of such cabinets is a doorway. Step into one, and you step out of the other, however many miles apart they stand, slipping straight through the castle's defences, because the cabinet was already inside the walls before those defences were ever a concern. For years the broken half sat in the room, just one more item in the endless pile, and then a frightened young student, given a task he did not want and could not refuse, found it and worked at it in secret night after night, and repaired it. When he finished, the school's defences, deep old wards the founders had woven into the foundations, to keep enemies from appearing in the corridors, meant nothing. There was already a door inside the walls. He had only to open it, and the enemies walk through into the heart of the castle, on a night that ended in death high on the astronomy tower. So the room of requirement is generous and it is dangerous, and the two are the same quality, seen from different sides. It gives you exactly what you need, and it asks no questions about why you need it, and it keeps whatever you give it forever. A frightened first year hiding from a bully and a dark wizard hiding a piece of his soul are to the room the same kind of visitor with the same kind of need, and the room answers them both. There is no morality in it. There is only the need and the answer and the long, patient keeping of everything that has ever been brought through the door. Most of the hidden things are gone now. Great hall of hoarded objects burned, near the very end, in a fire that should never have been lit, cursed fire that fed on everything it touched and grew into living shapes of flame. And it took the 1,000-year pile with it, the abandoned junk and the love letters and the dark object hidden among them, all of it in a single roaring night. What the castle had spent 10 centuries keeping hidden was undone in a few minutes by people who did not understand the fire they had called up. The room survived. It always survives. But the hoard it had gathered, the unedited archive of everything the school wanted to forget, is ash now, and whatever was learned from it died with the people who saw it last. The 7th floor corridor is quiet tonight. Painting of the dancing trolls hangs crooked in the dark. The stretch of blank wall is just a wall, smooth and quiet, giving no sign of what it can become. No one is walking it 3 times tonight. No one needs the room badly enough to call it, and so it waits, folded away into the stone, patient as the rest of the castle, ready to open for the next person whose need is great enough, ready to give them exactly what they ask for, and ready to keep whatever they leave behind for as long as the castle stands. It has been keeping our secrets for 1,000 years. It is very good at it. Rest easy. Whatever you would hide, the room would take it without a word, and tell no one, and keep it in the dark forever. There are ghosts in the castle, and the students grow so used to them that they stop seeing them clearly, which is its own small tragedy. Because what a ghost actually is, happens to be one of the saddest facts in the whole of the magical world. Cheerful version treats them as part of the scenery. A pearly white figure drifting through a wall, a familiar face at the feast, a bit of cold air on the back of the neck in an empty corridor. The students wave to them and walk on. They do not often stop to ask what it would mean to be one. Here is what it means. A ghost is not the soul of a dead person carried on to somewhere better. A ghost is what's left when a witch or wizard, standing at the very threshold of death, is too afraid to step across it and chooses instead to stay. The choice has a price, and the price is everything. They do not get to keep their lives. They do not get to touch the world, not really, not warmth or food or another person's hand. They become a print left on the air, the faintest pale impression of who they were, fixed forever at the moment they died, unable to change and unable to leave. They chose to remain because they could not bear to find out what lay on the other side, and so they got neither side. They got the cold corridor and the long centuries, and the slow understanding that they made the wrong choice and can never unmake it. The most famous of them puts it plainly to anyone who asks, though it costs him to say it. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, known to the students as nearly Headless Nick, will tell you, if you catch him in an honest moment, that he stayed because he was afraid. He was a knight in life, and a vain one, and his death was both gruesome and absurd, which is a cruel combination to be remembered by. He was sentenced to be beheaded, and the executioner was incompetent, and it took dozens of blows of a blunted axe to do the work, and at the end his head was not cleanly severed but left hanging by a thin flap of skin at the side of his neck. So he is nearly headless, and not properly headless, and this distinction, ridiculous as it sounds, has caused him centuries of genuine grief. There is a club for ghosts who lost their heads cleanly, a headless hunt, full of swagger and games, and Nick is barred from it forever, over half an inch of remaining skin. He has been refused at the door of the only company that might have understood him for more than 500 years. He throws himself a party every year to mark the anniversary of his death, a death day party, cold and grey and joyless, full of other ghosts standing about in a freezing chamber, and it is one of the bleakest gatherings the castle ever hosts, a celebration of the day. A frightened man chose an eternity of half-existence over the unknown. He stayed because he was afraid to die, and he has spent every year since regretting it, and he cannot take it back. That is a ghost. That is what the drifting white figures in the corridors actually are. Each of the 4 houses keeps a ghost, and each of them carries a darkness, but 2 of them are bound together by a story so sad that it explains the bearing of both at once. The ghost of Ravenclaw House is a tall, beautiful, silent woman the students call the Grey Lady. She rarely speaks. She drifts through the upper floors with her head bowed, avoiding company, holding herself apart even from the other ghosts, and for centuries almost no one knew who she had been or why she was so withdrawn. She was Helena, the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the 4 founders. Her mother possessed an object of great power, a diadem said to sharpen the wisdom of whoever wore it, and Helena, wanting to be cleverer than her own mother, wanting to step out from under that long shadow, stole it. She took the diadem and she ran far away across the sea, and she hid herself and it where her mother could not follow. When Rowena Ravenclaw lay dying, she could not bear to go without seeing her daughter one last time, and so she sent a man to find her. The man was a baron who had loved Helena for years, a love she had never returned. He found her at last in the place where she had hidden, and he asked her to come home, and she refused. And in his fury at being refused, in the wound of a love that had never once been welcome, he drew a blade and killed her where she stood. Then he understood what he had done. The grief of it broke him, and he took the same blade and turned it on himself, and he died there beside the woman he had murdered. They are both still in the castle. The Grey Lady is Helena, carrying her silence and her old shame through the centuries. That, the daughter who ran from her mother and was killed for it before either of them could be forgiven. And the ghost of Slytherin House is the man who killed her. The students call him the Bloody Baron, and they are afraid of him, and they are right to be. He is a gaunt, staring figure, and his pale robes are covered in silver bloodstains that never fade, the blood of Helena and his own mixed together, worn for all eternity where everyone can see. He drags heavy chains behind him, chains he put on himself, because the guilt of what he did demanded a penance and death did not free him from it. So he chose to remain as she did, and now the murderer and the woman he murdered haunt the same castle, in different houses, drifting past one another in the corridors for 1,000 years, bound together by a single terrible evening that neither of them can change and neither of them can leave behind. She will not speak to him. He follows at a distance, and the silver blood stays bright on his robes, and the chains stay heavy, and the centuries go on. Not every ghost's story is so violent, but even the gentle ones carry a shadow. The ghost of Hup House is a plump, cheerful figure the students call the Fat Friar, and he is the kindest of them, forever putting in a good word for students in trouble, full of warmth and easy laughter. But he was a man of the church who happened to be born with magic, in an age when those two things together could get you killed, and the people he served grew suspicious of the small wonders he worked, and in the end they executed him for it. He chose to stay on as a ghost because, even after all that, he was curious about what came next and not ready to find out, and so the warmth in him is real. But it is the warmth of a man who was killed by the very people he tried to help, and who decided eternity in a drafty castle was preferable to the unknown. And then there is Myrtle, who we have already met once, down in the dungeons, though her story belongs here too. She was killed by the Basilisk while crying alone in a bathroom, an unhappy girl bullied for her glasses and her tears, and she chose to remain as a ghost for a reason that is almost unbearable in its smallness. She stayed to haunt the girl who had bullied her. That was the whole of it. Not love, not unfinished greatness, not fear of the dark beyond, but a grudge, a desire to follow her tormentor and make her miserable. And by the time the grudge had run its course, there was no going back. And so Myrtle has spent the decades since in the same bathroom where she died, crying in the stalls, flooding the floor, as lonely in death as she was in life and far more lasting. She is the proof that the choice to stay does not require a grand reason. It only requires that at the final moment you cannot let go. Myrtle could not let go of a grudge, and it cost her everything that came after. This is the truth the books folded into the background, and the cheerful histories left out entirely. Castle is full of the dead who could not face death, frozen at the worst moment of their lives, drifting through the same corridors, year after year, watching the living children laugh and grow and leave, while they themselves can do nothing but remain. The students walk past them and wave. They do not understand what they are waving at. They are waving at the price of fear, made visible, drifting pale and cold through the candlelight, with no warmth left to give and nowhere left to go. Rest gently with that tonight, because it is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to make the warmth you have now feel like what it is. The ghosts would give anything to be where you are, drowsy and breathing and warm under the covers, with the whole soft weight of a real and living tiredness pulling you down towards sleep. They cannot have it. You can. Let yourself sink into it. The food at Hogwarts is one of the warmest things about it. Every evening the long tables in the great hall fill with dish after dish, roast meats and thick soups and fresh bread, puddings and pies, and pitchers of pumpkin juice, more than any school full of children could ever finish, appearing as if by magic the moment the students sit down. And it is, the students assume, exactly that, magic. Food simply arrives, the way everything in a castle of wonders simply arrives, and no one at the tables gives a single thought to where it comes from, or whose hands prepared it. The food comes from below. Beneath the great hall, reached through a passage behind a large still life painting of a bowl of fruit, where you must reach up and tickle the painted pear until it turns into a door handle, there is an enormous kitchen, and in that kitchen, every day and most of the night, an entire hidden workforce labours, so that the children upstairs never have to think about labour at all. They are house elves, and there are more of them at Hogwarts than anywhere else in the country, well over 100 of them, and they are slaves. That is the plain word, and the cheerful version of the castle works very hard to avoid it, so we will not avoid it here. House elves are a magical people, small and thin, with large eyes and high voices, and, for so many centuries that no one can remember the beginning of it, they have been bound to serve wizarding households without pay, without freedom, and without any choice in the matter. An elf belongs to a house and to a family. The elf cannot leave. The elf must obey any order, however cruel. The only thing that can free an elf is to be given a piece of clothing by their master, and so masters who wish to keep their elves are careful never to hand them so much as a sock, and an elf can serve a single family for its entire long life and die still bound, having never once owned itself. deepest horror of it is not the work, though the work is endless. The deepest horror is what has been done to the minds of the elves over those centuries of bondage. They have been so thoroughly shaped by their own enslavement that most of them love it. They take pride in their servitude. They measure their worth entirely by how well they serve. And the idea of freedom does not strike them as a gift, but as a shame, a punishment, a sign that they have failed so badly their family no longer wants them. An elf who is dismissed, who is handed clothes and set free against their will, is not relieved. They are devastated. They hang their heads in disgrace. This is what generations of slavery do to a people. They do not merely take away the chains, they make the chained ones love their chains, teach them to weep at the thought of having them removed. There was an elf at the castle who showed exactly what that looks like, and her name was Winky. She had served one family faithfully for her whole life, and through no true fault of her own she was dismissed, given clothes, cast out. Most people would call that freedom. Winky called it ruin. That. She came to work in the Hogwarts kitchens because she had nowhere else to go. But she could not bear it, because to her a free elf paid wages was a creature of shame, and she sank into a deep and visible misery, drinking too much, weeping for the family that had thrown her away, longing only to be bound again to someone, anyone, who would own her and give her orders and make her feel useful. She did not want to be free. She had been made unable to want it. And she sat in the warm kitchen beneath the feasting children, broken by the very thing that should have saved her, and almost no one upstairs knew she existed. There was one elf who was different, and his difference only proves the rule. His name was Dobby, and through a chain of events, he was freed from a cruel family that had abused him for years, and unlike Winky, Dobby wanted his freedom. He had dreamed of it. But even Dobby, the rarest of elves, the one who actually wished to be free, found that almost no one would hire a free elf, because a free elf expects wages and time off, and that offends the whole arrangement so thoroughly that most wizards would rather not employ elves at all than employ one on fair terms. Dobby came to work at Hogwarts, one of the only places that would take a free elf and pay him, and he was overjoyed by wages so small that any human worker would have refused them on the spot, and the other elves in the kitchen were embarrassed by him, ashamed of him, scandalized that one of their own would accept money and call himself free. The slaves were embarrassed by the freed man. That is how completely the thing had taken root in them. A student did try to do something about it. She was clever and stubborn, and could not let an injustice sit once she had seen it. And when she learned that the castle ran on slave labor, the food she ate 3 times a day was prepared by people who could not leave and were not paid, she was horrified, and she started a society to fight for the elves' rights. The other students laughed at her. They thought it was a fad, a phase, faintly ridiculous. Even her closest friends humoured her rather than joined her. And the elves themselves were the most insulted of all, because she was trying to free them, and being freed was the worst thing they could imagine, and they came to resent her so much that some of them refused to clean the part of the castle where she might be, case she left out clothing to trick them into liberty. She was right. She was completely, obviously right, and almost everyone, including the very people she was trying to help, treated her as a joke for it. The moral clarity of a single teenager could not move 1,000 years of comfortable arrangement, because the arrangement was comfortable for everyone except the people it was crushing, and the people it was crushing had been taught to defend it. So the castle changes once you know this. The bright feast in the great hall, the laughing children, the endless food appearing on the tables, the warmth and the plenty and the magic of it all. And below the long hot kitchen, the 100 small figures working through the night so the plates will be full at breakfast, working without pay, without rest, without the freedom to stop, most of them proud to do it, because pride is the only thing they have been allowed to keep. Cozy heart of the school is built on people who are owned. The children grow up inside that arrangement, and almost none of them ever see it, and the ones who do see it and try to change it are laughed out of the room. It is the oldest and quietest darkness in the castle, hidden in the warmest place, working through every night while everyone sleeps. It is working tonight, while you drift off, the same as it has worked every night for 1,000 years. The kitchen fires are lit, the small hands are busy, and the children upstairs sleep soundly, warm and well fed, never once wondering who made it so. Let that be the last thought before this chapter closes, not to trouble your rest, but to settle in beside it. There is always someone whose work makes the warmth possible. Tonight, simply rest in the warmth and let yourself drift, and the long patient labor below will go on without you, as it always has. The lake below the castle is black, and it is not called that for nothing. It is deep and cold and old, fed by no river anyone has traced, and its surface gives back the towers of the school in the daylight and a sheet of starless dark at night. Students swim in the shallows when the weather allows. They skate across it when it freezes. They watch the giant squid raise a lazy tentacle above the water on warm afternoons and think of it as a kind of pet. They have very little idea what is underneath them, and what is underneath them is an entire world with its own people, its own laws, and its own long memory, none of which has much to do with the school at all. Start with the squid, because it is the friendliest thing in the water, and even it should give you pause. A giant squid lives in that lake, a real one, large enough that its tentacles can reach a boat, sharing the same water that children paddle in every summer. It happens to be gentle. It has been known to nudge a falling student back toward shore and to accept bits of toast from the bank, like an enormous cat. But its gentleness is a piece of luck, not a law, and the students treat the whole lake as safe, because the one large thing they can see means them no harm. They are not thinking about the things they cannot see. Below the squid, in the cold middle depths, live the grindylows. These are small water demons, sickly green, with sharp little horns and long, brittle fingers, and they lurk in the weeds near the bottom, waiting for something warm to drift within reach. A grindylow's whole strategy is to seize a swimmer by the ankle with those long fingers, and drag them down into the dark and the weeds and hold them there until they drown. The fingers are easily broken, which is the only mercy in them, but a swimmer who does not know that, who feels something cold close around their leg and pull, will panic, and panic in deep cold water is how people die. The grindylows are down there now. They are always down there. The bright surface of the lake on a summer afternoon is the lid over a colder, hungrier place, and the students float on it without a thought. And then, near the very bottom, in the deepest cold, there is a village. The merpeople live there, and the merpeople are the part of the lake that the cheerful stories most badly misrepresent, because the word brings to mind a soft and beautiful creature, half girl and half fish, singing on a rock. The merpeople of this lake are nothing of the sort. They are a fierce and ancient people, grey-skinned, with long wild green hair and yellow eyes and teeth made for tearing, armed with spears, organized under their own chief, living in a settlement of rough stone dwellings, hung with the bones and trophies of the lake. Their voices above water are a harsh screeching, painful to hear, and only below the surface does that screeching become the language they actually speak, a full tongue with its own poetry and song that no one on land has ever properly learned. They have lived in that water far longer than the school has stood beside it. They regard the lake as their kingdom, because it is, and they suffer the castle on the shore the way the centaurs suffer it in the forest, as a noisy and short-lived neighbour to be tolerated and kept at a distance. The school and the merpeople keep a wary peace, and the depth of how wary it is became horribly clear during a single famous event, one the histories tend to dress up as a grand sporting occasion. There was a tournament, a contest between schools, and one of its tasks involved the lake. To set the challenge, people each champion loved most in the world were taken, placed under a deep enchanted sleep, and lowered to the bottom of the freezing black lake into the very heart of the merpeople's village, bound there among the fierce armed merfolk, and the lurking grindylows, and the killing cold. The champions were given 1 hour to dive down, find their person and bring them back up. 1 hour in water cold enough to kill, with guard mermen carrying spears and a clear understanding that anyone who lingered too long or reached for the wrong hostage would be driven off by force. People accepted this as entertainment. Adults arranged for their sleeping loved ones to be sunk to the bottom of a lake full of fierce creatures and trusted that a teenager would get there in time. That is the relationship between the school and the nation under the water, laid bare for one afternoon. The merfolk allowed it this once by arrangement. The arrangement did not make the bottom of that lake any less of a foreign and dangerous country, full of a people who had agreed to host the danger, but had not for one moment become friendly. There is a quieter horror to the lake as well, which is simply its size and its dark, and the sheer amount of it that no one has ever seen. The Slytherin students sleep in a common room built right against the underwater glass, with the green light of the depths filtering in, and the shapes of large things passing slowly in the murk beyond the window. Imagine falling asleep there as a first year, watching something the size of a man drift by the glass and out into the dark, and not knowing whether it was a merperson, or the squid, or something the school has never catalogued at all. The lake keeps its depths to itself. It has drowned people across the centuries, and it has given some of them back and kept others, and it lies there below the castle every night, vast and black and full, a whole world of cold water and fierce people and lurking things, pressed right up against the walls of a school full of sleeping children. Tonight the lake is still. The squid drifts in the deep, slow and harmless. Grindylows wait in the weeds as they always wait, and far below, in the cold heart of the water, the merpeople move through their stone village under the green dark, keeping their kingdom, singing in a language no one on the shore has ever learned. The peace holds, the boundary holds, the water stays on its side of the glass, let it. You are warm and dry and far from the cold, and there is nothing in the lake that can reach you here. Let your breathing slow, and let the dark water keep its own counsel, and rest. A school full of children with growing magical power and very little judgment is a difficult thing to keep in order, and the people who have run Hogwarts across 1,000 years have not always kept it in order kindly. The cozy version of the castle treats punishment as a lost house point, or a few hours scrubbing trophies without magic, a mild inconvenience, almost a joke. The true history of discipline at the school is far darker than that, and some of the worst of it happened well within living memory, sanctioned from the very top. The man who keeps the keys in the corridors of the castle, the caretaker, has held that post in misery for many years, and the source of his misery is that he is the only person in a school full of magic who has none of his own. He cannot do the wonders the children do without effort. He limps through the corridors after them, cleaning up what they break, hating the laughter and the mess and the careless ease of them, and more than anything he longs for the old days, the days before his time, when a caretaker was permitted to discipline students with his own hands. He keeps the instruments of those days in his office, oiled and ready, chains and manacles fixed to the walls, and he takes them down sometimes and looks at them, and remembers wistfully the punishments he is no longer allowed to use. He dreams of hanging students by their wrists from the ceiling. He keeps the paperwork that would let him do it the moment the rules ever change back. He is not inventing the old punishments. They were real. There was a long stretch of the school's history when a child who broke the rules might be chained to a wall in the dungeons, or hung from the ceiling by the ankles, or worse, and the caretaker keeps the memory of those days alive in his office, like a man tending a fire he hopes will one day be useful again. For most of the modern era, those punishments stayed locked in the past, and then, for one terrible year, came back, dressed in pink and smiling. A senior official from the Ministry of Magic was installed at the school, first as a teacher, and then, by maneuvering, as its head, and she set about restoring order through fear. She was soft-voiced and fond of kittens, and decorated her office in lace and pink. And she was one of the cruelest figures the castle ever held, precisely because none of the cruelty showed on the surface. Her chosen instrument of discipline was a quill, a black quill, handed to a student in detention, to be used for writing lines, the oldest and dullest punishment there is. Write out the sentence, she would say. I must not tell lies. Write it again. The student would write, and as they wrote, the words would appear in thin red lines carved into the back of their own writing hand. Because the quill used no ink, it used the writer's blood, drawn up from their own skin, and it cut the words into the back of the hand, even as it wrote them on the page, so that the longer the detention went on, the deeper the cuts grew, until the sentence was scarred permanently into the flesh. Child would leave that office with the words, I must not tell lies, carved into their hand for the rest of their life. Sit with what that actually is, stripped of the pink and the soft voice. It is torture. A grown woman placed in charge of children by the government tortured them with a cursed object that wrote their punishment into their bodies in their own blood, and made them do it to themselves, line after line, and the marks never healed. She did it to more than one student. She did it knowing exactly what the quill was. And for a long time she faced no consequence at all, because she had the authority of the ministry behind her, and the same official channels that should have protected the children were the ones that had sent her. The students who suffered it mostly kept quiet, because who would they tell, and what would telling do, when the person torturing them was the law? This was not 1,000 years ago in some dim and barbaric past. This was the modern school, the same warm castle with the same floating candles. And in a lace-trimmed office on an upper floor, a government official was carving sentences into children's hands with a blood quill and calling it detention. Punishment at the castle has taken other dark shapes too, ones that passed without anyone calling them cruel at all. There was a time when students who misbehaved were sent into the forbidden forest at night as their detention. Into the forest. The same forest with the unicorn killer moving through it. The same forest the spiders had claimed. The same dark wood the school spends the rest of the year forbidding students to enter on pain of expulsion. A handful of first years, barely 11 years old, were marched into that forest after dark to serve a punishment, accompanied only by the gamekeeper and a dog, and sent off in small groups to search the trees for whatever had been slaughtering the unicorns. That was considered an ordinary detention. No one thought it strange that the punishment for being out of bed after hours was to be sent into the single most dangerous place on the grounds in the dark. The casual acceptance of mortal danger as a teaching tool runs all the way through the school's history, so deep that the people inside it stopped being able to see it. So the bright and gentle version of school discipline, the lost points and the harmless scrubbing, sits on top of a far older and far colder tradition, and the cold tradition has never fully gone away. It lives in the chains in the caretaker's office and the wistfulness with which he polishes them. It lived not long ago in a blood quill in a pink office. It lives in the simple fact that a 1,000-year-old institution full of powerful magic has rarely been gentle with the children in its care when it decided they needed correcting, and that the line between firm discipline and outright cruelty has been crossed. This school more times than its cheerful histories will ever admit. Let that settle without letting it disturb you. Chains in the office are only memory now. The blood quill was found out in the end, and the woman who used it answered for it eventually, though the scars stayed. The forest detentions belong to a rougher time. Tonight none of it can reach you. You are warm and safe, and no one is going to send you anywhere in the dark. Let your hands rest open and easy. Let your shoulders drop, and let the old cold ways stay locked in the past where they belong. We are about halfway through tonight's walk through the castle now. which feels like the right place to pause for a single slow breath before we go on. Tap. If these quiet nights are helping you find your way down into sleep, the simplest thing you can do is subscribe, tat, so that the next one finds you on its own, and you do not have to go looking for it when you are already tired. And if there is some corner of this world you would like me to wander into on a future evening, a creature, a place, piece of history the book's only half explained, leave it in the comments. I keep a list, and a good many of the best nights here began as somebody's half-asleep suggestion. That is everything. Settle back into the pillow. There is a great deal of castle still ahead of us, and some of the darkest of it is yet to come, told as gently as all the rest, while you drift. High in the castle, behind a stone gargoyle that springs aside only for those who know the word, a spiral stair carries you up to the headmaster's office, and the office is the true centre of the school, the room from which 1,000 years of decisions have been made. It is a beautiful room, round and tall, full of strange silver instruments that whir and puff out smoke, and it has one feature the students rarely think hard about, though they should. The walls are covered, all the way up, with portraits, and every one of those portraits is a former headmaster or headmistress of the school, watching. The portraits of the magical world are not like ordinary pictures. The figures in them move and sleep and speak, and they can leave their frames to visit other paintings of themselves, hung elsewhere. A portrait holds an impression of the person it shows, their manner, their opinions, a great deal of their knowledge, captured at the height of their life, and fixed there to carry on after the person is gone. It is not truly the dead person come back. It is more like a very detailed imprint, something that thinks and talks the way the original did, going on long after the original has died. And when a headmaster or headmistress of Hogwarts dies, a new portrait of them appears on its own in that round office, and takes its place among all the others, and begins its long second existence on the wall. Consider what that means as a fact of the room. Every person who has ever run the school is still there, not gone, not at rest, but hanging on the wall in a gilt frame, dozing through the quiet hours, waking when something interesting happens, watching the current head go about their work. 1,000 years of leaders, the wise ones and the cruel ones, the great and the disgraced, all of them present in the same room at the same time, all of them able to speak. The dead never really leave that office. They only move to the wall, and they are bound to it by duty. A Hogwarts headmaster's portrait is sworn to serve the current headmaster, to give counsel when asked, and carry out tasks the sitting head requires. This is not a courtesy. It is an obligation woven into what the portraits are, and it means the dead heads have a job that does not end. They are, in a sense, still working, centuries after their deaths, still bound to the school, still required to help. There is something both useful and bleak in that. A new headmaster, uncertain and overwhelmed, can turn to the wall and ask the advice of everyone who ever held the post before them. But the people on the wall did not all choose to be there as servants forever, and some of them resent it, and all of them, willing or not, are tied to that round room for as long as their frames hang, giving counsel to the living until the end of time. The most disagreeable of them makes no secret of how little he thinks of the arrangement, or of the students, or of nearly anyone. He was, in life, the least liked headmaster the school ever had, a cold and superior man who regarded the post as a burden and the children as beneath him, and death did not improve his temper. His portrait is sour, sarcastic, forever pretending to be asleep so he will not have to be useful, slipping off to other rooms whenever he can to avoid the work. And he can slip away further than most, because he has a second portrait hanging in a grand old house far from the castle, the ancestral home of his family, and a person with portraits in two places can travel between them, vanishing from one frame and appearing in the other. This made him, at certain points in the school's history, an unwilling messenger, the only thing able to carry word swiftly and secretly between the castle and that distant house, grumbling the whole way, despising the errand, doing it anyway because the duty in his painted bones gave him no choice. A dead man, dragged back into service against his will, sneering through tasks he never agreed to, because the magic that made his portrait also chained it to the school. Now widen the thought beyond the office, because the portraits are not only in that one room, they are everywhere. The castle holds hundreds of them, in every corridor and stairwell and common room, figures who can move and talk and pass news from one frame to the next faster than any living messenger could run. A piece of gossip can travel the length of the school through the paintings in minutes. A face seen somewhere it should not be can be reported from frame to frame until it reaches the office at the top. The walls of the castle, quite literally, watch, and they talk to each other about what they see. The students grow up inside a building whose every corridor is hung with eyes, eyes attached to the imprinted minds of the dead, all of them gossiping, observing, remembering, and reporting upward. The children think the portraits are decoration, or at most a mild novelty, painted knight who shouts as you pass. They do not think of them as a network. They do not think of themselves as watched, but they are, every hour of every day, by the painted dead in the frames, who have nothing to do but look, and those painted dead carry secrets, because they have witnessed everything. Every private conversation ever held in that round office happened in front of an audience of dozens of former heads on the walls. Every secret order, every confession, every desperate plan, every death the office has seen, the portraits saw it all, and they remember. When the greatest headmaster the school ever had died, his portrait appeared on the wall the very next morning, and from that frame, calm and quiet, he went on guiding the people he had left behind, directing events from beyond his own death, passing instructions to the living through the painted version of himself. He had arranged it that way on purpose, knowing his portrait would carry on the work, so the dead do not merely watch in that office. Sometimes they govern from the wall, the imprint of a leader steering the school long after the leader's heart has stopped, and the line between a living headmaster and a painted one grows thin enough that you could pass your hand through it. It is a strange and lonely immortality when you hold it up to the light. The portraits do not get to live again. They get to hang on a wall and watch other people live, forever, bound to a duty that never releases them, dozing through the long centuries between the moments that matter. The dead heads of 1,000 years all crowded into one round room, all sworn to serve, all watching whoever sits at the desk below them. The students who reach that office are nervous of the headmaster. They never think to be nervous of the wall. Tonight the office is dark and the instruments are quiet, and on the wall the portraits doze in their frames. 1,000 years of leaders sleeping the shallow painted sleep that is the only rest they will ever get. They are not gone. They are only resting the way the whole castle is resting, the way you are about to rest. Let them keep their long watch from the wall. Let the dead heads doze in their gilt frames, and let yourself sink down into a deeper and warmer and more merciful sleep than any of them will ever know again. On the grounds of the castle, out, on the sweeping lawn where it should be nothing but grass, there grows a tree that tries to kill anyone who comes near it. It is a great old willow, and it does not behave the way a tree behaves. The moment something approaches within reach of its branches, it comes alive, lashing out with limbs as heavy as clubs, swinging with enough force to break bones and crush a body, beating the air and the ground around it in a fury that does not stop until the intruder is driven off or destroyed. The students call it the whomping willow, and they give it a wide and respectful distance, and they regard it as one more piece of the castle's dangerous strangeness, a violent tree on the lawn, unexplained, simply there. What almost none of them know is why it is there, and the why is one of the saddest secrets the grounds contain. The willow is a lock. It was planted, fully grown and already violent, to guard the entrance to a hidden tunnel that opens at its base, and the tree's whole purpose is to keep anyone from reaching that tunnel by making the ground around it lethal. There is a single way past it, that. Down among the roots there is a particular knot in the wood, and pressing it freezes the tree instantly, stilling every thrashing branch, so that someone who knows the secret can slip beneath the frozen limbs and down into the passage below. The passage runs long and dark, out from under the lawn, beyond the boundary of the grounds, and comes up at last inside a building in the village nearby, a building with a reputation of its own. That building was known, for years, as the most haunted house in the whole of the country, stood apart at the edge of the village, shuttered and decaying, and from inside it at night came sounds that froze the blood of anyone who heard them. Screaming, howling, the crashing and splintering of furniture being torn apart, of something large and anguished throwing itself against the walls, of a creature in unbearable pain or unbearable rage, night after night, behind boarded windows in an empty house. The villagers were certain that violent spirits lived there, ghosts so savage that no one dared go in, and they kept their distance, and locked their doors, and listened to the screaming carry across the dark, and the legend grew until the house was famous for its terror across the whole magical world. There were never any ghosts in it. There never had been. The screaming had a far simpler and far more heartbreaking source. A boy had come to the school years before, a quiet and gentle boy, clever and kind, who carried a secret he could tell no one. As a small child he had been attacked and bitten by a werewolf, and the bite had made him one. Every month, when the moon came full, his body was no longer his own. He became a wolf, a true and dangerous wolf with no memory of the boy inside it, savage and uncontrollable, a threat to anyone who came near. He had never asked for this. He had been a child when it happened. It's that. And it meant that once a month for the rest of his life he would turn to something that could kill the people he loved without even knowing it, had done so. The headmaster of the school took him in anyway, when other schools would have turned him away in fear, and to make it possible, he arranged the tree and the tunnel and the house. On the nights of the full moon, the boy was led out of the castle, down past the frozen willow, through the long dark tunnel, and into the shuttered house at the far end, and there he was sealed in alone to endure the change. With no other living thing to attack, the wolf turned on the only target left to it, which was the boy's own body, that biting and clawing and hurling itself against the walls, screaming through the night, in a voice that was half animal, and half the boy still trapped, somewhere inside. Those were the screams the village heard. Those were the howls that built the legend. The most haunted house in the country was a frightened, lonely child, locked away once a month to tear himself apart in the dark, so that no one else would be hurt. And the terrible sounds that kept a whole village awake were the sounds of his suffering, alone, with not one person beside him to say that it would pass. The cover story was deliberate. It served the school's purpose perfectly, because a house everyone believed was full of murderous ghosts was a house no one would ever go near, which kept the secrets safe and kept the boy's condition hidden and kept the villagers away from the one place a monster was loose each month. The legend of the haunting protected everyone except the person at the center of it, who got the loneliness and the pain, and the lie told about him on top of it all. His monthly agony recast as a ghost story to frighten children. He lived with it for years. He kept the secret faithfully, and he grew up believing, with good reason, that the truth of what he was would cost him every friend and every chance he ever had, because that is what the world had taught him a werewolf was worth. He did in time get a small mercy. A handful of friends discovered his secret and, rather than abandoning him, that found a difficult and dangerous way to keep him company through the transformations, so that for a few precious years the screaming house held a boy who, for the first time, faced those nights with friends beside him, and the nights of the full moon became, briefly, something he could almost bear. It did not last. Almost nothing in his life did that. But for a while the most haunted house in the country held something the legend never accounted for, which was loyalty and friendship, and the rarest thing of all for someone in his position. which was not being alone. So the violent tree on the lawn is a lock on a door, and the door leads to a house that screamed, and the screaming was never a ghost. It was a child in pain, and a school that chose to hide him rather than turn him away, and a kindness wrapped inside a cruelty wrapped inside a lie, all of it true at once. The students who give the willow its wide and wary distance have no idea that they are walking past the entrance to one of the loneliest stories grounds ever held. They see a tree that hits people. They do not see the boy who used to be led beneath it once a month into the dark. Tonight, the willow is still, its great branches hanging quiet in the dark, with nothing near enough to wake them. The tunnel beneath it is empty. The house at the far end is silent at last. The screaming long since ended. The boy who suffered there, gone now into whatever rest was finally allowed him. There is no one in the dark tonight who needs to be locked away. The moon can do as it likes. You are safe and warm and whole, and there is nothing in you that the night will turn against. That be a comfort as you drift. The screaming has stopped. The house is quiet, and so now are you. The castle holds something that is not a ghost, and it is worth being clear about the difference, because the difference is the whole of why it is frightening. The ghosts, as we have seen, were once living people who chose to stay. They are sad, pale, and harmless, unable to so much as lift a spoon. The thing we are speaking of now was never alive at all, can pick up far more than a spoon, and has been making the school miserable for as long as anyone can remember, and the most powerful witches and wizards ever to walk these halls have all arrived at the same conclusion about it, which is that there is nothing whatsoever they can do. His name is Peeves, and he is a poltergeist. He is not the spirit of a dead person. He is something the castle itself seems to have produced, a being of pure chaos and mischief that came into existence somewhere back in the dim early history of the place and has been here ever since, indestructible, irremovable, and entirely without conscience. Where the ghosts are echoes of people, Peeves is an echo of nothing, a creature made of malice and play in equal measure. And he has spent centuries doing exactly as he pleases inside, a building full of people who would give a great deal to be rid of him and cannot manage it. The danger of him, the part that lifts him above a mere nuisance, is that he can touch the world. Ghosts drift through walls and through furniture and through people, able to chill the air and nothing more. Peeves is solid in his effects. He picks things up and throws them. He unscrews the chandeliers and lets them fall. He drops water bombs and worse on students passing below, jams the locks of classrooms, tips over suits of armor, hurls walking sticks and ink pots and whatever else comes to hand, and he aims to do real harm as often as he aims merely to annoy. A heavy object dropped from a height by an invisible hand can break bones or crack a skull, and Peeves knows this, and Peeves does not care. He is a being of accident and injury loose in a school full of children, and he treats the whole castle as his to vandalize. And across 1,000 years, no one has found a way to make him stop. That is the truly strange part. This is a place of overwhelming magical power. People who have run it include some of the greatest wizards in the history of the world, beings who could reshape stone and bend the laws of nature and wake the very statues to fight. Not one of them has ever been able to get rid of Peeves. He cannot be killed because he was never alive. He cannot be banished by the usual means because he is bound to the castle as firmly as the wards in the foundations. He has been ordered out, threatened, bargained with, and endured, and he is still here, and the staff have long since stopped pretending otherwise. Tolerate him, because tolerance is the only option they have left. A succession of the most formidable magical authorities in existence, faced with one indestructible spirit of chaos, have collectively thrown up their hands. He is simply a fact of the building now, like the cold in the dungeons or the moving of the stairs, a permanent resident of anarchy that the institution has had to fold into its daily life because it could not do anything else. There is exactly one being in the entire castle that Peeves is afraid of, and it tells you something about Peeves, that the one thing he fears is a murderer. The ghost of Slytherin House, gaunt figure in the blood-stained robes who killed the woman he loved, and then himself, is the only presence that can make Peeves fall silent and obey. When the bloody Baron looks at him, Peeves cringes and goes still and does as he is told, and no one has ever fully explained the hold the Baron has over him, except that perhaps a creature of mindless chaos recognizes, in a soul weighed down by real and terrible guilt, something heavier and darker than itself. Whatever the reason, the chaos bows to the murderer, and that is the only leash the castle has on Peeves, a single dead man with blood on his robes and chains on his wrists, holding back the one thing the living cannot control. And yet, because nothing in this castle is ever quite as simple as it seems, even Peeves has a place in the strange loyalty of the building. He torments the students and the staff without mercy, year after year, and he answers to almost no one. But when the worst hour finally came, when the castle was attacked and the people inside it fought for their lives, Peeves did not stand aside, and he did not join the other side, which a creature of pure malice might easily have done. He fought. He dropped heavy and horrible things on the attackers from above, cackling the whole while, turning his endless talent for causing injury against the enemies of the school for once, instead of its children. The spirit of chaos chose the castle. Not out of love, perhaps, because it is not clear Peeves is capable of love, but because the castle is his home, in some way that runs deeper than his mischief, and when his home was threatened, the indestructible thing in the walls came down on the side of the people trying to save it. There is a lesson in that somewhere, though Peeves would be the last to admit it, and the very next morning he was back to unscrewing the chandeliers as though nothing had happened. So the castle contains a thing that cannot be destroyed, cannot be removed, cannot be reliably controlled, and means real harm, and everyone has simply learned to live with it. The students duck the falling water bombs and curse his name and walk a little faster under the chandeliers. The staff pretend, for the sake of dignity, that the situation is under control, and it is not, and everyone knows it is not. Peeves is the proof that even a fortress of immense power cannot make itself perfectly orderly. Something wild and uncontrollable can take root in the most carefully guarded place and never be dislodged, and that sometimes the only victory available is to endure. He has outlasted every headmaster who ever tried to evict him. He will outlast the next one. He is part of the castle now, the way a scar is part of skin, and the castle has made its uneasy peace with the fact that it will never be free of him. Tonight, even Peeves is quiet, or quiet enough. Somewhere in an upper corridor he is no doubt plotting tomorrow's mischief, turning over which lock to jam and which armor to topple. But for now the chandeliers hang undisturbed and the halls are still. Let the spirit of chaos keep to itself for one night. You have nothing to fear from it here. The water bombs are far away, the falling things are someone else's problem, and the only thing settling over you now is the soft and harmless weight of sleep. Let it come. A castle is supposed to be a sealed thing. Walls, gates, defences, a clear line between inside and outside that only the keepers may cross. Hogwarts presents itself as exactly that, the safest fortress in the country, ringed with old and powerful protections, impossible to enter uninvited. And then there is the quieter truth, that, the one the keepers would rather not dwell on, which is that the castle is riddled with secret passages, hidden ways in and out that thread through the walls, and under the grounds and beyond the boundary, and that no single authority has ever known where all of them are. There are 7 of them, the secret passages out of the castle, or at least 7 that were ever mapped, and the number itself is a small embarrassment to the people responsible for keeping the school secure. Caretaker, the man whose entire job is to know the castle and police its corridors, knew of only 4 out of 7. There were 3 more ways out of his own fortress that he had never found, that he did not know existed, that students were using under his nose to come and go as they pleased. while he patrolled the corridors above, certain he had the place locked down. Keeper of the keys did not have all the keys. He never had. And the passages he did not know about were known instead to a handful of clever, rule-breaking students who had taken the trouble to find what the adults had missed. Passages lead to interesting places. One of them opens behind the statue of a one-eyed witch on an upper floor, and if you know the way to wake it, the hump of the statue slides open, and a steep stone chute drops down into a long tunnel that runs all the way to the cellar of a sweet shop in the village below. Generations of students used that one to slip out of the castle and into the warmth of the shop, without ever passing a gate or a guard, emerging among the barrels and boxes in the cellar, and climbing up into a world of sugar and freedom, then carrying their contraband back the same way. Another passage ran under the violent tree on the lawn, the one we have already followed, out to the screaming house at the edge of the village. The others wound off to other exits, some of them long, some of them treacherous, all of them invisible to anyone who did not know the secret of the entrance. And here is the thing about secret passages in a building 1,000 years old. They were not all built at once, and they have not all survived. Over the centuries, some of them have collapsed. A tunnel that ran for hundreds of years caves in, and the way is lost, and whatever was in it at the moment it fell, whoever might have been using it, is simply sealed away in the rubble underground, and the castle goes on above as though the passage had never been. One of the 7 had caved in by the school's later years, choked with fallen stone, impassable. No one knows for certain how many more passages once existed, and have already collapsed and been forgotten, entirely, sealed and buried and dropped out of memory, because a passage no one remembers is a passage no one looks for. Castle has been honeycombing itself, with hidden ways, and then losing them for 10 centuries. The map of its secret geography has never been complete, and never could be, because the building has more hidden space than any living mind has ever held at once. There was, for a time, a map that came closer than anything before or since. 4 students, gifted and reckless and devoted to one another, spent years roaming the castle by night, finding every passage and every shortcut, learning the movements of every person and every patrol, and they poured everything they discovered into a single enchanted document. The map showed the entire castle and grounds, every room and every corridor, every secret passage including the ones the caretaker had never found. And strangest of all, it showed where every single person in the castle was, at that exact moment, each one marked with a moving dot labelled by name, walking the corridors in real time. With that map, a student could see the caretaker coming 3 floors away, could find an empty passage and slip out of the castle, while the dot of every adult who might stop them was visible and avoidable. The map was the closest anyone ever came to holding the whole secret body of the castle in their hands, and it was made not by the school's keepers, but by 4 boys breaking every rule in the place, and it proved beyond doubt what the keepers had always feared, which was that the castle could be known far better by those who wished to misuse it than by those charged with protecting it. The passages were used for small and mostly harmless things, sweets smuggled in, tank, midnight trips to the village, the ordinary contraband of children testing the edges of their cage, But the same passages that let a student slip out for sweets would let something else slip in, and that is the darker shape of the matter. A fortress with 7 hidden doors, 3 of them unknown even to its own caretaker, is not as sealed as it pretends to be. The protections and the foundations could stop a wizard from appearing inside the walls by magic, but they could do nothing about a tunnel that had been there since, before the protections were laid, running unseen under the boundary, opening into a cellar in the village. Anyone who learned the secret of a passage had a way past every ward the founders ever wove. The students used that knowledge for sweets. It was only ever luck and the obscurity of the passages that kept it from being used for worse. By the very end, when the castle was under the control of people who meant the students harm, and the corridors were watched, and the gates were sealed, the hidden ways became something more than mischief. They became survival. A new passage opened, formed by the strange room on the 7th floor, running from inside the castle out to a friendly inn in the village, and through it food and allies, and eventually, an entire resistance moved back and forth beneath the notice of the people who thought they held the school. Secret ways that had carried sweets for centuries carried fighters in the end. The porousness of the fortress, the thing its keepers had always seen as a weakness, became the one advantage the trapped students had, a way to bring in help and a way to get out, hidden in the walls of a castle that even its captors could not fully seal. So the safest fortress in the country has always been full of holes, and the holes have always been known better by the clever and the desperate than by the people in charge. Castle keeps its secret passages the way it keeps everything else, slowly and without fuss. Some of them open, and some of them collapsed, and some of them surely still undiscovered. Threading through the walls beneath the feet of students who never suspect that the corridor they are standing in has a hidden twin running parallel just beyond the stone. The building is more passage than anyone knows. It always has been, and somewhere in the deep walls, sealed tunnels that no living person remembers wait in the dark, holding whatever was in them when they fell. Tonight the passages are dark and still, the open ones empty, the collapsed ones silent under their weight of stone. No one is slipping out for sweets tonight. No one is creeping in. The hidden ways keep their own quiet, threaded through the sleeping castle, going nowhere, carrying no one, waiting as patiently as the rest of the building for a use that will not come before morning. Let them wait. You are not going anywhere either. You are exactly where you should be, warm and still and beginning at last to drift. Let the hidden castle keep its hidden ways. You have everything you need right here. On the first night of every school year, the new students file into the great hall, small and frightened and 11 years old, and they are sorted into their houses by a hat. It is an old, patched, shabby thing, pointed wizard's hat gone soft and creased with age, and one by one the children sit on a stool, and the hat is lowered onto their heads, and after a moment it calls out the name of a house, and that is that. The students think of it as a charming ceremony, a bit of harmless theatre to begin the year. They do not think very hard about what the hat is actually doing while it sits on their heads, and what it is actually doing is reading their minds. The hat sees inside you, that is its function, and it performs it on every child who comes to the school. When it settles over a student's eyes, it looks into the whole of their mind, their thoughts and their fears, their courage and their cruelty, the things they are proud of and the things they would never say aloud, the shape of who they are and the shape of who they might become. It weighs all of it in a few seconds, and then it decides. A 1,000-year-old enchanted object goes through the private interior of an 11-year-old, the whole unguarded self of a frightened child, and sorts them by what it finds there. The hat knows things about the students that the students do not always know about themselves. It has seen the ambition hidden under the shyness, the cowardice tucked behind the bravado, the capacity for darkness in a child who seems all light, and it tells no one what it sees. It only chooses a house, and keeps the rest of what it found inside that small head to itself. The reason the hat can do this goes back to the founders, and it is one of the more unsettling pieces of the school's beginning. When the 4 founders grew old and began to think about what would happen after their deaths, they worried about how students would be sorted once they themselves were gone. Because in the early days, each founder had simply chosen their own students by hand. So they took a hat, the hat that had belonged to one of them, and each of the 4 placed a portion of their own mind into it, their judgment, their knowledge, their way of seeing a person, so that the hat could go on choosing as they would have chosen forever. The hat is not merely enchanted. It contains pieces of the 4 people who built the school, 4 imprinted minds working together inside a scrap of old cloth, and when it reads a child, it is the founders themselves, in a sense, still doing the reading, 1,000 years after they died. The same Salazar Slytherin, who left a monster in the dungeons to purge the impure, has a portion of his mind inside the hat that touches every new student's head. That thought tends to land differently once you understand it. Once a year, the hat does something besides sort. It sings. At the start of each year, it delivers a song, usually a description of the 4 houses, and what each one values, a pleasant enough piece of ceremony that the students half listen to while waiting for their own turn on the stool. But the hat has 1,000 years of watching behind it, and the founders' minds inside it understand the school's deepest danger better than anyone living, and so a handful of times across the school's history, the hat has set aside its ordinary song and sung a warning instead. It has sung of the founders falling out, of the bitter division that split the 4 friends and nearly ended the school in its first years. Again and again it has sung that the 4 houses must stand together, that the danger to the castle has always come most surely from within, from the houses turning against one another, and the school divided against itself. It has warned in the only voice, and the only moment it is given. That unity is the one protection the founders could not weave into the walls, the one defense that the students themselves must choose to provide. And the students, on the whole, do not listen. They clap politely, and then they go back to their houses, and the old rivalries go on exactly as before, and the hat falls silent for another year, having said the most important thing it knows to a hall full of children waiting for dinner. The hat understands what the founders understood, which is that the question of who controls the castle is the question on which everything turns. School has immense defensive power sleeping in its walls, the protections in the foundations, the statues that can be woken to fight, the wards that watch the boundary. All of that power answers to whoever legitimately holds authority over the school, to the headmaster, who has a deep bond with the castle's defenses and can call them up in a crisis, can wake the stone to march, can raise great protective enchantments over the whole structure when it is threatened. In the right hands, that bond is the thing that makes Hogwarts the safest place in the country. But authority can be taken, and a fortress that pours its strength into the hands of whoever holds the office is only as safe as the legitimacy of the person who holds it. The school learned this in its darkest modern years, when the wrong people took control. First, a single official from the ministry maneuvered her way into the headmaster's chair, and then, later and far worse, the school fell entirely under the control of those who served the dark wizard the castle had been fighting all along. The headmaster's office was occupied by a man placed there by that regime. Cruel deputies were installed among the staff, and they were permitted to discipline the students with curses, to torture children in detention as a matter of routine, to make fear the governing principle of the school. Attendance was made compulsory, so that every magical child in the country was required to come and be held inside walls that had stopped protecting them and started controlling them. The same castle that had been built as the one safe place for magical children became, for a year, a place they could not leave and were afraid to be. The fortress is only ever as good as the hand on its keys. Turn the keys over to the wrong people, and every wall that was meant to keep danger out becomes a wall that keeps the children in. And yet the castle itself did not seem to accept it fully. There are signs all through that dark year, and the one before it, that the building knew its true loyalties and resented the usurpers. The headmaster's office is said to have refused to open properly for the official who seized it. The portraits on the walls, bound to serve the legitimate head, found ways to serve the resistance instead. The staff who remained loyal moved through the corridors, keeping the students safe in 100 small hidden ways. And the secret passages carried fighters in and out beneath the notice of the people who thought they held the school. castle endured its captors the way it endured Peeves, the way it endured everything, by waiting, by holding its true self quiet beneath the surface, by remembering whose side it was on even when the wrong people sat in the chair. It had been built to protect the children. That purpose was woven deeper into its stones than any usurper could reach. And when the moment finally came to throw the usurpers out, the castle was ready, because it had never truly stopped being itself. The hat saw all of it coming in its way. The founders had warned, through the hat 1,000 years before, that the school's gravest danger was division and the seizing of the school from within. And they had been proven right more than once. The warning is still sung every few years to a hall of children who do not listen, and the hat goes back to its shelf in the headmaster's office and waits for the next first night, that, when it will once more be lowered onto the heads of frightened 11-year-olds, and once more look into the whole of who they are, and once more keep every secret it finds. Tonight the hat sits quiet on its shelf in the dark office, its work done until September, the 4 old minds inside it dreaming whatever a hat dreams. It is not reading anyone tonight. Your thoughts are your own, unsorted and unjudged, free to slow and soften and drift wherever they wish as you sink towards sleep. No one is looking inside you. Let the hat rest on its shelf, the castle keep its own quiet counsel, and let your mind, unwatched and unhurried, finally let go. A school is the last place a sensible person would store something deadly, and yet Hogwarts has, more than once across its history, been used as a vault for objects and creatures so dangerous that keeping them anywhere near children defies all sense. And the people who made those decisions were not foolish people. They were among the wisest in the world. They simply trusted the castle and trusted themselves and placed terrible things inside a building full of 11-year-olds and counted on the lock's holding. There is one year that shows this more plainly than any other, and it began with a warning at the start of term feast. The students were told, in the same breath as the usual notices about the forest and the corridors, that one particular corridor on the 3rd floor was now forbidden to everyone who did not wish to die a very painful death. That was the phrasing. That a school full of children was informed, almost in passing, that part of their own school would now kill them if they entered it. And then the students were sent off to bed, and lessons began, and life went on, with a lethal corridor sitting in the middle of the castle, behind a single locked door. Behind that door was a dog, and it was enormous, with 3 heads, each one slavering and snarling, filling a small room from wall to wall. Every one of its 3 sets of jaws ready to tear apart anything that came through the door. The dog was a guard, and it stood on top of a trapdoor, and the trapdoor was the way down to what was being hidden beneath the school. A monster with 3 heads, kept behind one locked door, on a corridor that children walked past on their way to other rooms, and the only thing that could calm it was music. Play it a tune, any tune, and the 3 heads would grow drowsy, and the great body would slump into sleep. Stop playing, and it woke at once, savage as ever. That was the first protection. A sleeping monster and a melody, between the students and the thing in the dark below. What the dog guarded was the most coveted object in the magical world. It was a stone small and red that could turn ordinary metal into gold and, more than that, could produce a drink that granted its maker eternal life. The person who had made it had lived for centuries because of it, ageless, undying, as long as the stone kept producing its drink. Such an object was the dream of every dark wizard and greedy fool who ever lived, because it offered the one thing no amount of power can otherwise buy, which is escape from death itself. And when the place it had been kept was no longer safe, the decision was made to hide it at Hogwarts, inside the school. The key to immortality, the thing every dangerous person in the world would kill to possess, tucked beneath a trapdoor in a castle full of children, because the castle was judged to be the safest place left to put it. The protections laid down to guard it were a gauntlet of deadly tests, and every one of them was placed inside the school. Past the 3-headed dog, There was a plant that would strangle anyone who struggled against it, dragging them down into a smothering tangle in the dark. Beyond the plant lay a room full of enchanted keys with wings, where the right key had to be caught on a broomstick while the rest attacked. After the keys came a giant chessboard where living stone pieces would batter an intruder senseless, and the only way across was to play and to win and to be willing to be struck down as part of the game. There was a troll set loose as a guard. There were poisons arranged as a riddle, where choosing the wrong bottle meant death. And at the very end, the final protection, there was a mirror. The mirror deserves its own moment, because it is one of the most beautiful and most dangerous objects the school ever held, and its danger is of a rare and quiet kind. It is a tall, ornate looking glass, and when you stand before it, you do not see your reflection. You see the deepest and most desperate desire of your heart, shown to you as though it were real, standing there in the glass before you. A lonely person sees themselves surrounded by love. A grieving person sees the dead, returned and smiling. A person hungry for greatness sees themselves crowned. Whatever you want most in the entire world, the thing you may never have admitted even to yourself, the mirror shows it to you, vivid and warm and close enough to touch, and it does not show you reality, only longing. That sounds like a gift. It is closer to a trap, and a cruel one. People have stood before that mirror and been unable to walk away. They have wasted before it, day after day, transfixed by the vision of everything they wanted, unable to leave it, unable to eat or sleep, not even certain whether what they were seeing was real or possible, only certain that they could not bear to look away from it. The mirror has driven people out of their minds. It shows the heart exactly what the heart cannot stop wanting, and the wanting is so total that it can swallow a whole life. A person sitting before a piece of glass until they starve, gazing at a happiness that was never there and never could be. That object, that beautiful and devouring thing, was kept at the school and was used as the last guard on the stone, hidden in the deepest chamber beneath the forbidden corridor. The final defense against the theft of immortality was an object that could trap a thief in their own desire forever. And 3 children, none of them yet 12 years old, went down through all of it. Past the 3-headed dog, past the strangling plant, past the flying keys and the battering chess pieces, past the riddle of the poisons, all the way down to the mirror at the bottom, that, because the protections that were meant to stop the most dangerous wizard in the world turned out to be exactly the sort of obstacle course that 3 determined first years could, between them, just barely survive. That is the part that should give the deepest pause. The deadly defenses worked well enough to keep out a grown dark wizard for a time. They did not keep out 3 11-year-olds. The lethal corridor, the monster, the traps, the devouring mirror, all of it was sitting inside a school, and the school's own children walked straight through the middle of it. Because that is what children do, and very nearly died several times over in the process. The stone was destroyed in the end by choice, to keep it from ever being used. The dog was sent away. The traps were dismantled. But the willingness that put them there in the first place did not go anywhere, and it is the truly unsettling thing, deeper than any single object. Across its history, the school has again and again been treated as a safe place to keep things that are not safe at all. Deadly creatures, devouring mirrors, keys to immortality, lethal enchantments laid down in corridors where children walk. The locks have mostly held, trust has mostly been justified. But the margin has often been a great deal thinner than anyone upstairs at the feast ever knew, and more than once, the only thing between the students and the terrible things kept among them was a single locked door and a melody to keep monster asleep. Tonight there is nothing deadly behind the doors. The forbidden corridor is just a corridor now, the dog long gone, traps long dismantled, the devouring mirror locked away somewhere far from any child who might lose themselves in it. Whatever your heart wants most, there is no glass here tonight to trap you in the wanting. There is only the dark and the quiet and the soft real weight of your own tiredness, which asks nothing of you and shows you nothing but the simple way down into sleep. The dangerous things stay locked away. You are safe among them. Rest. The library at Hogwarts is vast. Tens of thousands of books, rising in tall shelves through a hush complete that students lower their voices the moment they step inside. Most of it is exactly what a school library should be. The accumulated learning of 1,000 years of magic, free to anyone with the patience to read. But at the back, past the ordinary shelves, there is a section roped off from the rest, and to pass the rope you need a note signed by a teacher, and behind it the school keeps the books it has decided are too dangerous to leave lying around. It is called the restricted section, and what it holds is the reason the rope is there. The books in that section are not dangerous because they are rude or frightening. They are dangerous because of what they contain, and, in some cases, what they will do to the person who opens them. There are volumes back there, bound in materials no one likes to think about too closely. Books of curses and dark workings. Books that hold instructions for magic so terrible that the knowledge itself is treated as a weapon. Some of the books are not safe to read at all. There are volumes that scream when they are opened, a high tearing shriek that does not stop until the cover is slammed shut, and others that are kept chained to the shelf because they have been known to attack, to bite, to do harm to a careless hand. The school holds a collection of the very darkest magical knowledge in existence, and it keeps it locked behind a rope and a grill, inside a building full of children, because it has decided that the knowledge is better contained and guarded than destroyed. There are arguments for keeping it. You cannot defend against what you refuse to understand, and a school that exists in part to teach defense against dark magic cannot pretend that dark magic does not exist. The knowledge has to live somewhere, and a guarded section of a guarded library, accessible only with permission, is as careful a place to keep it as anywhere. That is the reasoning, and it is not foolish. But the reasoning has a flaw running through the middle of it, and the flaw has a name, and the name is one we have met before in these corridors. That the student who became the most dangerous dark wizard in the world learned some of his worst magic in this school's own library. Path to the single most terrible thing he ever did, the splitting of his own soul into pieces so that he could not truly die. The magic that turned a clever boy into something barely human and unleashed 2 wars on the world. Path ran in part through a book on a shelf in the restricted section. The method was described there, in a volume the school had chosen to keep, and a curious and cold and brilliant student found it, and read it, and understood it, and went looking for someone who could tell him more. The most evil magic known to wizardkind was sitting in a school library, behind a rope, waiting for exactly the wrong child to ask for a note. He got the note. He read the book. And the knowledge the school had so carefully guarded did precisely the harm the guarding was meant to prevent. Because the guarding was never going to be enough to stop someone clever enough, and patient enough, and willing to go where the books pointed. The rope keeps out the idly curious. It was never going to keep out a person who had decided to become a monster. The library is not even the most direct way the school has handed dark magic to children. There is a class taught every year whose entire subject is the dark arts and how to defend against them, and to teach defense. The school has at times shown students the very curses it warns them against. There was one year that went further than any other, when the teacher of that class stood at the front of a room full of 14-year-olds and demonstrated on living creatures the 3 worst curses in the world. These are curses so foul that using a single one of them on another human being earns a sentence of life, imprisonment with no possibility of release. They are called the unforgivable curses because there is no excuse the law will accept for their use. And that year, a class of children watched all 3 performed in front of them. The first the teacher showed was the curse of total control. He took a small creature and placed it under the curse, and the creature's will was simply gone, replaced by his, so that it did whatever he wished, danced, tumbled, flung itself about, a living thing turned into a puppet with no power left to refuse, he explained. While the children laughed at the creature's antics, that this same curse worked on people, that a witch or wizard under it would do anything the caster commanded, would harm themselves, would harm those they loved, would have no more control over their own body than the creature twitching on the desk. The laughter stopped fairly quickly. The second curse he showed was the curse of pain, pure torment with no purpose but agony, and he held a creature in it, while it writhed and screamed in a torture that had no point except to hurt, until the children begged him to stop. And the third curse, the last one, was the curse of death. He spoke the words, and a flash of green light crossed the room, and a living creature that had been moving a moment before was simply dead, with no mark on it, no wound, no struggle, gone between one instant and the next. He killed it in front of them to show them what death looked like when it came by magic. A roomful of 14-year-olds watched a creature murdered on a desk as part of a lesson. That teacher, it later turned out, was not who he claimed to be. An enemy in disguise with reasons of his own for hardening the children to such things. But the demonstration itself was treated, at the time, as legitimate education, a strong teacher giving students an unflinching look at the darkness they would have to face. And that is the uncomfortable place where the line runs. That the school holds the darkest knowledge in the world and guards it, and teaches about the darkest magic in the world, and sometimes shows it, all in the name of defense, all with the reasoning that you cannot fight what you do not understand. The reasoning is sound. The danger is that the same knowledge that arms a student against darkness can, in the wrong head, simply arm them with it. The library that taught a boy to defend himself taught another boy to tear his soul apart. The class that showed children what to fear showed them, in the same lesson, exactly how it is done. The school cannot fully resolve this, and to its credit it has mostly not pretended to. The knowledge has to live somewhere, and a guarded place inside a guarded school is as good as any, and most of the children who pass through never seek out the dark shelves at all. Most of the ones who do are only frightening themselves on purpose the way the young like to do. But the path is there. It has always been there, threaded through the stacks at the back of the library, behind the rope, waiting. For 1,000 years it has mostly led nowhere, browsed by the curious and forgotten by morning. Once or twice it led somewhere terrible, and the school goes on keeping the books, because the alternative, a world where the knowledge of darkness exists, only in the hands of those who mean to use it, and not at all in the hands of those who would fight them, may be worse. It is a wager, and the school has been making it for 1,000 years, and the wager has mostly paid, and the cost of the times it did not, is written across the whole bloody history of the magical world. Tonight the library is dark and silent, the ordinary shelves and the roped section alike. No one is reading anything tonight, least of all the books that should not be read. Dark knowledge sits closed on its guarded shelves, screaming nothing, biting no one, harmless in the dark so long as no hand reaches for it, and no hand is reaching tonight. Let the books stay shut. There is nothing you need to know before morning, nothing to study, nothing to fear. Let your mind put down everything it was carrying, and let the long hush of the library settle over you and rest. It is easy to think of Hogwarts as eternal. It has stood for 1,000 years, and 1,000 years has a way of looking like forever. Continuity so long that the school seems less like a building than like a fixed point, something that was always there and always will be. The histories encourage this. They tell the story of the school as a smooth and steady line, headmaster after headmaster, year after year, an unbroken descent from the founders to the present day. The truth underneath that smooth line is far more fragile, because the school has come close to ending, genuinely close, more times than its comfortable histories like to admit, and its survival has been less a matter of certainty than a long series of narrow escapes. It nearly died at the very beginning. The four founders built the school together in friendship, and within a generation that friendship had broken so badly that the whole project almost collapsed with it. The rift between them, the bitter falling out over which children deserved to be taught, drove one founder away in anger and left the other three to hold together a school that had lost a quarter of its makers and a great deal of its unity. An institution is most fragile when it is youngest, before its traditions have hardened and its reputation has set, and Hogwarts in its early years was a young and fragile thing nearly torn apart by the quarrel of the very people who had raised it. That it survived its founders falling out at all is the first of its narrow escapes. And the monster left sleeping in the dungeons was the parting gift of that quarrel, a danger planted in the first generation that would nearly finish the school twice more in the centuries to come. It nearly died of its own entertainments. There was a contest the school took part in for a time, a grand tournament between the great magical schools, full of glory and danger, and the danger was real enough that champions died competing in it, died often enough, year after year, that the death toll eventually grew past what anyone could justify, and the tournament was abandoned, discontinued for centuries, because the cost in dead students had become impossible to defend. Think of what that means about the ordinary appetites of the magical world. School willingly sent its finest students into a contest that killed them, year after year, for the honor of winning, and only stopped when the bodies piled high enough to overcome the thrill. The school survived its own willingness to risk its children for spectacle, but only after that willingness had killed a long line of them, and when the tournament was finally revived, generations later, killed again almost at once, because the danger had never really been fixed, only set aside. It nearly died when the monster in the dungeons first woke. A student was killed, down in the depths, by the creature Slytherin had left sleeping, and the school came within a breath of being closed for good. The death of a single student in a school is a catastrophe, and a death by a monster no one could find or explain was the kind of catastrophe that ends institutions. The authorities were ready to shut the doors. The only thing that kept the school open was a lie, the false blaming of an innocent boy, which let everyone pretend the danger had been found and dealt with when it had not. The school survived its first brush with its own buried monster by sacrificing an innocent, expelling him, snapping his wand, ruining his life, so that the doors could stay open and the truth could stay buried. It was a narrow escape bought at a shameful price, and the monster simply went back to sleep to wait for the next time. The next time came 50 years later, and the school nearly died again. The monster woke a second time, and students were found frozen, petrified, struck down one after another, and the panic that swept the castle brought it once more to the edge of closing. The governing board met to shut the school. Parents pulled their children out. When the creature finally took a victim down into the depths, the decision to close was all but made. Only the ending of the threat at the last possible moment, by children who should never have had to face it, kept the school alive. Twice the buried monster nearly finished what the founders' quarrel had begun, and twice the school survived by the narrowest margin, by luck and by the courage of children, not by any safety its keepers had managed to provide. And it nearly died in a different way under the wrong leadership, not in a single dramatic catastrophe, but in a slow draining of everything that made it worth saving. There was a headmaster who hated the post and the students both, who stripped the joy out of the school to suit his own cold temper, who banned the games and dimmed the warmth, and ran the place as a man endures a chore. A school can survive a monster more easily than it can survive that, because a monster can be fought and killed in a single night, while a slow rot at the top eats the spirit of a place year by year with nothing loud enough to fight. And the worst version of that came at the very end of the school's dark history, when it fell under the control of those who served the enemy, and the building that had been the one safe place for magical children became a place of fear and compulsion and torture. That was the nearest the school ever came to dying as itself. Not its walls falling, but its soul being hollowed out and replaced. The fortress of protection turned into an instrument of control. The walls stood the whole time. What nearly died was the thing inside the walls, purpose, the safety, the reason the founders had built it at all. So the smooth and eternal line of the school's history is a story told in hindsight, smoothed over after the fact, with all the near deeds tidied into footnotes. Truth is a building that should have ended a dozen times, and did not, that survived its founder's quarrel, and its own deadly games, and its buried monster waking twice, and its cold leaders, and its dark conquerors. Survival was never once certain. At each of those moments something or someone held the line by the thinnest of margins, and the castle came through one more time. The castle endures, it has always endured, but endurance is not the same as safety, and the 1,000 years of survival the school wears so easily are in fact 1,000 years of narrow escapes, each one closer than the last, each one leaving its mark somewhere in the stone. Tonight the castle stands the way it has always stood, through every near ending, every monster, every dark year still here, still keeping its watch. The escapes are all behind it for now. Nothing is ending tonight. The walls are quiet and whole, the danger is all in the past, and the long fragile miracle of the school's survival simply continues. One more peaceful night added to the 1,000 years. Let the old escapes rest where they fell. The castle is still standing. So are you. And the only thing ahead of you tonight is sleep. The tallest tower of the castle is the astronomy tower, and for most of the school's history, it was a place of quiet and height and beauty. Students climbed it at midnight with their telescopes and their charts to study the stars, and from the top, the whole of the grounds spread out below, the dark lake and the darker forest, and the lights of the village far off, and the sky above so close and so clear that you felt you could reach into it. It was the gentlest place in the castle, a tower built for looking upward. And then, on a single night, it became the site of the darkest thing that had happened to the school in living memory, and it has never quite been the gentlest place since. To understand that night, you have to understand the one weakness in all the castle's defenses, the weakness the founders could never fully close. The protections woven into the foundations were built to stop force. An enemy could not appear inside the walls by magic, could not break through the wards, could not cross the boundary unseen. For 1,000 years no hostile force had ever entered the castle, because the castle could not be broken into from the side. But a fortress that cannot be broken from the outside can still be opened from the inside, and that is the door the founders left, because there is no way to build a wall that protects against the people you have let in. The enemy understood this, and so rather than attacking the walls, they reached for a child. A student of the school, young and frightened, and given a task he did not want and could not refuse, was set to open the castle from within. We have already passed the means he used. The broken cabinet hidden among the 1,000-year hoard in the strange room on the 7th floor, one half of a match pair whose twin stood far away in a dark shop, a doorway that had been sitting inside the walls since before the protections were ever a concern. He spent a year on it in secret, working alone night after night, mending the thing that would let the enemy through, hating the task and terrified of what would happen to him and to his family if he failed. He was not a monster. He was a boy who had been handed something monstrous to do and could see no way out of it. And when at last he finished, deep old wards the founders had laid meant nothing at all, because there was now a door inside the walls, and he had only to open it. The enemy came through, into the heart of the castle, on a night when the school's greatest protector was away, and then returning, already gravely weakened by a separate and terrible task of his own. He was the headmaster, the one figure the enemy feared, the one whose presence had kept the worst of the darkness at bay for decades. and he came back to the castle that night already dying, poisoned by a curse he had taken on knowingly. With very little time left, the enemy's forces moved through the corridors for the first time in 1,000 years, and the headmaster, weak and failing, was driven up to the top of the astronomy tower, to the gentle place built for looking at the stars, and there he was cornered. What happened on the top of that tower was believed, for a long time, to be the foulest betrayal in the whole of the war. The headmaster was killed there, beneath the open sky, by a member of his own staff, a teacher he had trusted and defended for years against everyone who doubted the man's loyalty. The killer spoke the curse of death. The green light flashed, and the greatest protector the school had ever known fell from the top of the tower to the ground, far below, dead, struck down by a hand from inside his own castle, by someone he had vouched for, by someone the whole school had believed was on their side. To everyone who learned of it, it was the ultimate treachery, proof that the enemy's reach extended into the staff itself, that even the headmaster's trust could be turned into a weapon against him. The killer fled into the night and was hated, for years, as the worst traitor the school had ever harbored. The truth, learned much later and at great cost, was something else, and far sadder than any betrayal. The killing had been arranged in advance by the headmaster himself. He was already dying, with only weeks to live, and he had asked the man to do it, for reasons tangled together out of mercy and strategy and love. He wished to spare himself a slower and more degrading death from the curse, already killing him. He wished, above all, to spare the frightened boy who had been ordered to do the killing, to keep that child from becoming a murderer, to let him keep his soul whole. And he needed the man who struck the blow to remain trusted by the enemy, deep under cover, the one spy placed closest to the darkness, position that one terrible act of apparent treachery would secure beyond any doubt. So, the man who seemed to commit the foulest betrayal in the war had in fact committed the most painful act of loyalty in it, that, killing the person he had served faithfully for years on that person's own orders, taking on the hatred of everyone he was secretly protecting, carrying the truth alone in silence, because revealing it would have undone everything. He let the whole world believe he was a traitor and a murderer, and he kept the secret to his own death, and it was only afterward that anyone understood what that night on the tower had really been. The boy who opened the castle could not in the end bring himself to do the killing he had been sent to do. He stood on the tower with his wand raised and the headmaster before him, weak and unresisting, and he found that he was not the murderer the enemy had tried to make of him. He lowered his wand. Someone else did the terrible thing, for all the tangled reasons. But the boy had been spared the worst of it, spared exactly as the headmaster had intended. 10. And though his life was hard and frightening for a long time afterward, he did not carry the weight of having killed. That, the headmaster's last piece of strategy had worked. He had protected a frightened child even in the manner of his own death. Tower has carried that night ever since. Students still climb it to study the stars, and the view from the top is still beautiful. The lake and the forest and the far-off lights spread out below the close clear sky. But the people who know what happened there cannot look at the top of that tower without seeing it, the cornered dying man, the raised wands, the green flash beneath the stars, the long fall. The gentlest place in the castle became the place where its protector died, killed from inside by a door a child had been forced to open, and the meaning of that night took years to come clear, and was sadder when it did. Castle could not be broken from outside. It never was. It was opened from within by one of its own, and its greatest defender fell to a hand he himself had guided, on the top of the tower built for looking at the stars. Let that night stay where it belongs, far in the past, under stars long since wheeled away. The tower is quiet now. No one is cornered at the top of it tonight. The protector is long at rest, the truth long since told, the frightened boy long since grown and free. That there is nothing on the tower tonight but the telescopes and the charts and the close clear sky. and nothing in the corridors but quiet. Let the old grief settle. Let the stars wheel slowly overhead, and let yourself drift, safe in a castle where the worst nights are all behind it, down into sleep. Every danger we have walked through tonight, the monster in the dungeons, the dark in the forest, the cold in the lake, traitors, and the buried weapons and the near endings, all of it was, in the end, a rehearsal for a single night, the night the war itself came to the castle. After 1,000 years of holding its watch, of keeping its children safe behind walls that had never been breached by force, the school faced the one thing it had always been built against, and had always until then managed to keep at a distance. The enemy and the whole of his army marched on Hogwarts, and the castle, for the first and only time, had to fight for its life. It began with a choice that the Sorting Hat had been urging for 1,000 years, and that the school had never quite managed to make. The houses had to stand together. The old rivalries, the centuries of division the founders had warned would one day undo the school, had to be set down at last, because divided the school would fall in an hour, and united it had a chance. The students who chose to stay and fight came from across the houses, the brave and the loyal and the clever, the ones too young, who hid themselves among the older ones because they would not be sent away. And they stood together in the entrance hall while the staff prepared the castle's defences. And for one night, the thing the hat had begged for, across 1,000 years, finally came true, too late to prevent the war, and just in time to meet it. Then the castle itself woke. The deputy headmistress, a stern and formidable woman who loved the school with her whole heart, stood in the entrance hall and spoke the old command that woke the stone, and all through the castle the suits of armour and the statues that had stood silent in their alcoves for centuries came alive at once. The armoured knights drew their swords, the great stone figures climbed down from their pedestals, gargoyles and the carved warriors and the statues that had been mere decoration an hour before, and they marched, hundreds of them, down through the corridors and out to form a wall of living stone around the school. This was the capacity that had slept in the walls since the founders laid them, defence the castle had always held in reserve and almost never needed, finally called up on the one night it was needed most. The building rose, literally rose, its own stone bones marching out to fight for the children inside it. And the woman who woke them was heard to say, through her tears, she had always wanted to use that spell. 1,000 years of stone soldiers, sleeping, waiting, and at last awake. The staff raised a great enchantment over the whole castle, the combined power of every teacher and every protection the founders had woven, drawn up together into an enormous shield, a dome of shimmering protection that closed over the school like a held breath and turned the enemy's first assault aside in showers of broken light. It would not hold forever. Nothing could, against an army that size and a power that great. But it held long enough for the defenders to take their places, long enough for the meaning of the night to settle over everyone inside, and when at last it shattered, the battle began in earnest, and the castle that had been the safest place in the world became, for one night, the most dangerous, and the whole world of the school rose with it, and not only the people. From the deep kitchens, where the enslaved had laboured without thanks for 1,000 years, the house elves came pouring up, armed, with cleavers and knives and whatever they could carry, led by one of their own, charging into the battle to defend the home that had never treated them as anything but property, fighting for it anyway, out of a loyalty the castle had never earned, and they gave freely. From the forest, where they had held themselves apart from human affairs for 1,000 years, watching the stars and despising the noise of wizards, the Centaurs finally came, thundering out of the trees with their bows when the need grew great enough to move even them. Chaos in the walls chose its side, the indestructible spirit raining horrible things down on the enemy from above, cackling, fighting for the castle in the only way it knew. Even the great dark creatures of the grounds were drawn into the night, The whole of the school's strange world, the people and the ghosts and the slaves and the wild things and the stone itself. Every part of the 1,000-year castle rose together against the dark, because the castle was their home, and the dark had come to take it. It was not won cleanly, and it was not won without terrible cost. And the cost is the part that must be spoken gently, because it is the heaviest thing in the whole night. The castle was wounded badly. Towers that had stood for 1,000 years were shattered in moments. Walls were blown apart. Corridors brought down in rubble and fire. Great windows broken, the stones scarred and burning. The building took damage that night that no 1,000 years of weather and use had ever come close to, the thing that had endured everything broken in places in a single night. And the people, the defenders fell, more than 50 of them before the night was through. Students and teachers and parents and friends, laid out in the end in the great hall, where they had eaten their feasts in the same warm room, gone quiet now, and turned into a place for the dead. There was a young man, one of a pair of brothers, so alike, and so full of laughter that no one could ever tell them apart. And he died in the castle that night, and his brother lived, and was never quite whole again. There was a man who had spent his whole life suffering for what he was, the gentle boy who had screamed alone in the haunted house once a month, grown now, and married and a new father, and he died in the castle, and his wife died beside him, and their child was left an orphan before he was old enough to remember either of their faces. And there was a boy too young to fight, who had crept back into the castle because he could not bear to stay away, who had spent his school years cheerfully following the older students about with his camera. And he died too, small and brave and far too soon. They are only a few of the dead. There were many more, each one a whole life ended, each one mourned by someone, all of them laid together in the warm hall at the end, beneath the enchanted ceiling that went on showing the indifferent stars. But the castle held. When the longest night was over and the sun came up at last, it rose on a broken and smoking castle, on a great hall full of the dead and the grieving, on survivors too exhausted and too sad to feel anything yet like victory. The enemy was finished. The war that had hung over the magical world for so long had ended. There, in the castle, on the grounds, in the rubble of the place that had been built 1,000 years before, to be the one safe haven for magical children. And it had been exactly that, on its worst and last night, in the truest and most terrible way. It had nearly died to keep its children alive. The stone had risen, the slaves had risen, the wild things had risen, the houses had finally stood together, and the castle had spent everything it had. Every defense slept in its walls for 1,000 years, all at once, to hold the line one final time, and it had held. When the sun was fully up, the survivors began the slow work of counting what was left. The war was over. The thing that had hung over the magical world for so long was simply gone, and in its place was a silence no one quite knew what to do with. Castle around them was hurt in a way it had never been hurt before. Whole sections of wall lay open to the sky. Towers had come down, courtyard was cratered, and the glass was gone from 100 windows. And yet, even in those first grey hours, before anyone had the heart to begin, the castle had already started, on its own, and with no spell to tell it to mend. No one gave the order to start. That first morning, people simply began. A teacher lifted a fallen stone and set it back into the gap it had come from, and the stone settled into place as though it had never left. The mortar closed over the seam. By the time she had turned to look for the next one, the join had gone smooth and grey and old, the way the rest of the wall was old, so that a minute later she could not have shown you where the break had been. That was how the castle mended, not all at once, and not without hands to help it, but with a slow sureness that ran underneath the work the people were doing, as though the building were taking up its own share of the load. Some of the repair was ordinary magic. Wands lifted beams back into place. Spells coaxed shattered glass up off the floor in a soft rain that ran backward, every splinter finding its own window and its own strip of lead. until the coloured panes stood whole again with the morning behind them. Staircases that had cracked apart knitted along the break, flagstones lifted out of the floor and lay back down flat. A wizard who knew the old building spells could do in an afternoon what a crew of ordinary builders would have needed a year and a crane to manage. But some of the mending had nothing to do with anyone's wand, and that was the part the workers spoke of afterward in low voices. Walls closed that no one had touched. A man would clear a heap of rubble from the foot of a tower, go to fetch more hands, and come back to find the lowest courses of the tower already standing again, the stones stacked and set, and waiting for the next. People began to understand that the castle had its own way of putting itself back together, woven into it long ago by the founders, and that the war had only woken that old magic, the way the battle had woken everything else in the walls. The moving staircases were among the first things to come right. For a day after the battle they had hung still and crooked, jammed in odd positions, as though the castle were too tired to shift them. Then, on the second evening, a single staircase swung, slow and careful, from one landing to another, the way it had 1,000 times before. By morning they were all moving again, gliding from floor to floor on their old, unknowable schedule. And something about the sight of them going about their ordinary, restless business made more than one survivor sit down on a step and weep. The suits of armour walked back to their plinths. They had come down at the headmistress's command on the night of the battle, every empty visor and every old sword, and had fought where they were sent to fight, and had been hacked and scattered across the courtyard by morning. Now, one by one, pieces gathered themselves. A breastplate found its gauntlets. A helm rolled upright and seated itself on a pair of shoulders. The armour walked, clanking and dented, back to the alcoves it had stood in for centuries, and arranged itself, and went still, and waited to be needed again, which, for a long time after, it would not be. The great hall was cleared. That was the hardest room, and the one no spell could truly set right, because what had filled it could not be mended by any wall closing over a crack. The long tables were carried back in. The benches were set straight. The enchanted Seelishnen shone cold paling sky all through the last hours of the battle, went on showing the sky, indifferent as ever, brightening to a soft blue over a hall that was learning, slowly, how to hold ordinary noise again. A few of the castle's hidden places were slower to return, and one of them may never have returned at all. The room of requirement, which had given the school whatever it needed for 1,000 years, had burned on the night of the battle. A cursed fire, set loose by a boy who could not control it, had filled the room where the castle kept its forgotten things, and had eaten everything inside, including, though almost no one understood it then, one of the dark objects that had to be destroyed before the war could end. The fire had been escape, barely, but the room had taken a hurt that no ordinary flame could give. In the years afterward, students still went looking for it, pacing the stretch of 7th floor wall 3 times the way the old stories told them to, thinking hard of what they needed. Sometimes the door appeared, sometimes people said it did not, or appeared changed, smaller, the air inside it tasting faintly of smoke. Whether the oldest and kindest of the castle's secret rooms had been hurt past full healing, or had only drawn back for a while to mend in its own way, no one could ever quite say. And on the wall behind the headmaster's desk, in the round office at the top of the spiral stair, there was a perch that stayed empty. The phoenix had gone the night the old headmaster died, a year before the battle, lifting off the windowsill and flying out over the grounds, while his song hung in the air behind him, and he had never come back. The portraits filled the office again. The old headmasters and headmistresses woke in their frames, dozed, gave their advice, kept their watch over the school as they had agreed long ago to do. But the golden perch by the window stood bare, and the new headmistress left it where it was, and did not have it taken away, because some absences are meant to be kept, rather than tidied. The grounds healed more slowly than the stone, the way living things do. The lawns had been churned to mud and ash, scorched in long black scars where spells had gone wide and fires had burned through the night. Through the first spring after the battle, the grass came back over all of it, green pushing up through the burned places, until the scars were only faint lines in the turf, and then not even that. The greenhouses whose glass had blown out in the fighting were glazed again, and the plants inside, many of them hardy and strange, and not much troubled by a war, went on growing as though nothing had happened. The little wooden hut at the edge of the forest, the gamekeeper's home, which had been set alight on the last night, was built again, larger, if anything, by the enormous hands of the man who lived there, and a few friends who came to help him raise it. The hospital wing took longest of all the rooms to empty, and that was its own slow kind of healing. For weeks after the battle, the long white beds stayed full, and the matron who ran that wing went up and down the rows day and night, mending broken bones and burns and the deeper hurts that no single spell can reach. One by one, the beds came free. The badly injured grew less so, and then well enough to leave, and then went home until the wing held only a few, and then only the usual small number, and then, by the new year, only the ordinary traffic of a school again. A sprained wrist from the pitch, a cold caught out on the grounds in the rain. The white beds stood made up and waiting, the way they are meant to, for nothing worse than the small troubles of growing up. In the entrance hall, the 4 great hourglasses, the ones that count the house points, had run out to nothing during the long disorder of that last year, their thousands of coloured stones spent. When the new term began, they were set going again, and through the autumn they slowly filled, handful by glittering handful, with emeralds and rubies and sapphires and topaz, as points were won and lost once more for ordinary things, for good answers and late homework and small kindnesses in the corridors. Out on the pitch, the tall goalposts went back up, and the game came back with them, the stands filling on bright cold afternoons, and the old shouting rolling out across the grounds. A headmaster long ago had banned that game out of sheer sourness of heart, and stripped the school of its joy to suit himself. The game had outlasted him by centuries, the way the warm things in the castle tend to outlast the cold ones, and now it came roaring back, as though it had never once been gone. What no one could quite explain, in all the months of rebuilding, was how completely the castle came back. A wall closed is only a wall closed, but by the end the place did not have the feel of a building that had been patched and propped and made do with. It had the feel of itself again, whole, the way it had been whole for 1,000 years, as though the founders had built into the very stone something more than the shape of the castle, some stubborn idea of what the castle was, an idea that a war could wound but could not erase, and that drew the broken thing back toward its true shape the way water finds its level. The scars healed under, the shape held, castle remembered what it was meant to be, and became that again. And then, because a school is a school, the children came back. In the autumn after the battle, the carriages came up the long drive again, drawn by the skeletal black horses most of the students still could not see, and the great doors opened, and the hall filled, and the candles floated up under the brightening ceiling. The castle, mended in body if not yet in memory, did the thing it had been built to do, took them in and kept them warm. It hid its long history of dark and difficult things behind an ordinary evening face, the way it always had, and let them believe, for a while longer, that it was only a school. Some things the castle could not rebuild, and did not try to. It could close a wall in an afternoon. It could not bring back the 50 who had died in its corridors on the last night of the war, and it did not pretend that it could. What it did instead, in the way old places do, was hold on to them. The dead were buried, most of them, away from the school, carried home to the towns and villages and farms they had come from. But they were not gone from inside the walls, because the walls had been there too. The flagstone where a man had fallen was the same flagstone the next morning, and the morning after that, and for all the mornings since. and the people who had been there walked around it for a long time without quite meaning to. A place where something happens keeps a mark that has nothing to do with magic, only with the people who carry it, and the castle was full of people who carried it. By the lake, in the months after, a tomb was raised, white marble, plain, set on the grass between the water and the trees, well away from the noise of the school. The man inside it had been the headmaster for many years, and had died the year before the battle, high on the tallest tower, at the hand of someone he had trusted. He had been laid to rest there at the school, because the school had been, in every way that counted, his home, and because he had asked for nothing grander. Students walked down to the lake to see it. Most of them had never met him. They stood at the white stone in the early evening, with the water going dark behind it, and then they walked back up to the castle for supper, and that was its own kind of remembering too, the slow kind that does not need to say anything aloud. The ghosts stayed, as the ghosts always stay. The fat friar drifted through the lower corridors with his old good cheer. The pale woman of Ravenclaw kept her long silences. Night, who was almost but not quite headless, went on telling his endless stories to anyone who would float beside him and listen. That they had seen the castle hurt before, across 1,000 years, and they had seen it heal before. And there was a comfort in that for the living, in passing a ghost in a corridor and knowing that it had watched these same stones stand through worse and go on standing. People asked that, in the years afterward, whether a building could be said to remember anything at all, or whether it was only the people inside it doing the remembering and laying it onto the stone. It is not a question with a tidy answer, that. But anyone who has stood alone in an old place in the last of the light, in a corridor where something once happened, that knows the feeling of being in a room that is not quite empty, that holds more than the air in it, that seems to be keeping something on your behalf so that you do not have to carry all of it yourself. Whatever that feeling is, Castle had a great deal of it. 1,000 years of children, 1,000 years of first nights and last nights, of friendships and long quiet ordinary days, soaked into the stone the way wood smoke soaks into a beam. The dark things were part of it, so were all the bright ones. And the castle held them together, the way it held its black passages and its warm hall together under one roof, that, and asked nothing of the children walking its corridors, except that they be young in it for a while, and then go out into the world, and let the next ones come. Once a year the day comes around again, the day it had all happened, and on that day the castle is quieter than on any other. The students know the date before anyone tells them. There is a stillness to the morning that has nothing to do with any rule, a sense in the corridors of something being held. Somewhere in the day the names are read, the 50 of them, slowly, out loud, in a hall gone quiet enough to hear the candles. No one hurries through it. The little ones who were not yet born when it happened listen to names that mean nothing to them yet, and the older ones listen to names that mean a great deal, and for one held hour the whole school carries the same quiet between them. Then the day goes on. The plates fill again, and the talk comes back, and by evening the staircases are moving the way they always move. Castle does not stay in that stillness, and it was never meant to. It stops there once a year, the way you might lay a hand for a moment on an old doorframe as you pass, and then it takes up its long ordinary life again. That is the last of the secrets, or the last of them worth keeping you awake to hear, and this one is the gentlest of them all. Under all of it, under every hidden chamber and bound ghost and old dark spell this long night has carried you through, Castle was only ever trying to do one simple thing. It was trying to keep its children safe through the dark, so that they could grow. It did that for 1,000 years. It did it on the worst night of all, when it gave up nearly everything it had to do it. And it is doing it still, tonight, somewhere far away in the dark, with its candles burning low, and its staircases gone still, and its towers keeping their patient watch over the sleeping grounds. All of that is far away from you now, and far in the past besides. The war is long over, The castle is whole again, and somewhere out in the dark, in a fold of mountains far to the north, it is keeping its watch the way it has kept it for 1,000 years, over a few hundred sleeping children, and over the long memory of everything that has happened inside its walls. It is very late there now. The noise has gone out of the castle the way it goes out of any old house near midnight, slowly, room by room, until what is left is the sound a great building makes when it thinks no one is listening, the settling of stone, the low draw of air along a corridor, the faint shift of a staircase easing into a new position and then going still. In the great hall the 4 long tables stand empty and clean. The candles that float above them have burned down low, and a few have gone out, and the ones that remain hang in the dark like the last embers of a fire. Far above, the enchanted ceiling has given up its daytime blue and shows the true sky over the mountains, clear and cold and scattered with more stars than any city sky could ever hold. No one is there to look up at it. It goes on showing the stars anyway, turning them slowly through the long hours, the way it has every night for 1,000 years whether anyone watched or not. Below the hall, down where the warmth of the castle gathers, the kitchens have gone still for the night. The day's work is long finished. Great copper pots hang cooling on their hooks. The fires under the ovens have been banked down to a red glow, enough to last until morning, and the long work tables have been wiped and left bare. The small folk who keep that part of the castle running have finished and gone to their own rest at last, and the only light is the low red of the banked fires, and the only sound is the tick of metal slowly cooling in the dark, up in the towers, and down in the deep places of the castle, behind their hidden doors and their sleeping portraits. Common rooms have burned down to embers. An armchair sits pulled close to a dying fire where someone left it. A book lies open and face down on a cushion, its place lost to be found again tomorrow. Portrait that guards the door has stopped its muttering and dozes in its frame. The fire ticks and settles. The room holds the day's warmth a little longer, in the old stone and the worn cushions, and then lets it go slowly into the night. And in the dormitories, behind the drawn curtains of the 4-poster beds, the children are asleep. This is the thing the whole vast building exists to protect. This handful of hours, these rows of sleeping students breathing slow in the dark, safe behind walls that will close around any harm before it reaches them, watched over by magic so old that the founders who first set it down are themselves 1,000 years asleep. Whatever waits out in the world for these children, in the morning or in the years to come, it is not here and it is not now. Now there is only the dark and the warmth, and the slow sound of their breathing, and the castle standing around them like a pair of cupped hands. Out in the corridors the torches have burned low in their brackets, throwing more shadow than light along the old stone. The moving staircases have come to rest for the night, settled into whatever pattern the castle has chosen for them, and they will not shift again until the morning. The suits of armour stand silent in their alcoves, dented from the battle and never quite repaired, their empty visors turned toward the dark. They are not frightening standing there. They have the look of old soldiers who have done their fighting and are glad of the quiet. All along the walls the portraits sleep. The painted knights have laid down their painted swords. The grand old witches and wizards have nodded off in their high painted chairs. Here and there one has wandered out of its own frame to share a neighbour's, the way they do, 2 old friends dozing side by side in a single picture while their own frames hang empty until dawn. They will be back by morning, no one minds. Castle is long used to its dead, and its painted keeping their own strange hours. The ghosts drift through the lower halls on their slow night rounds, pale and unhurried, going nowhere in particular. They are not restless tonight. After all this time, the dark of the castle is simply where they live, and a ghost passing through a midnight corridor is only an old resident taking the air, keeping the great building company through the hours when the living are asleep and cannot. In the hospital wing, the long row of beds stands empty and made, the white sheets turned down and smooth in the dark. There is no one in them tonight. Tall windows let in the moon and lay it in pale squares across the floor, and the cabinets along the wall hold their rows of corked bottles, the sleeping potions, and the steadying tonics, and the one that regrows a bone overnight, all of them still and labelled and waiting. The matron's office at the end is dark, her door ajar, her lamp put out. On the worst nights this room has been full and frightened and bright with hurried light. Tonight it is only a long quiet room full of empty beds, holding itself ready, as it always is, for whatever the morning might bring, and asking nothing of anyone in the meantime. Off in the clock tower, the great pendulum swings in the dark, slow and heavy and sure. It is taller than a man, a wide disc of dull gold at the end of a long rod, and it has kept the same patient time through every hour this castle has counted. Back and then forward, back and then forward. The sound of it carries down the empty stair, a deep soft tick with a long wait inside it, the wait stretching out a little further each time until you are sure the next one will not come, and then it comes. Nothing else moves up there, that. Just the slow gold weight going back and forward in the moonlight, measuring out the night the way it measured out all the nights before it, in no hurry at all to reach the morning. Down at the foot of the castle, the entrance hall lies still, its great doors barred for the night against the dark outside. The wide marble stair climbs up into shadow, and along one wall stand the 4 tall hourglasses that keep the score between the houses, each one filled with its own bright stones, emeralds and rubies, and the rest, glinting faint in what little light there is. They have stopped for the night, the way everything has. Whatever was won and lost today in classrooms and corridors is held now in the still glass, counted and set aside, waiting for the morning to start the slow trickle over again. The hall keeps its quiet, the doors hold, and the stair goes up into the dark toward the sleeping floors above. In the library, the long shelves stand in rows of shadow, and the books are still. Even the ones that mutter or snap at careless fingers, or have to be kept shut with a buckled strap, have gone silent for the night. At the very back, behind its rope and its iron chain, the restricted section keeps its dangerous knowledge to itself in the dark, the locks holding as they have held every night, for longer than anyone now alive can remember. Nothing stirs there. The most dangerous room in the castle is, tonight, only a still room full of sleeping books. High up in the owlery, the air is cold and clean and smells of straw and night. The owls have settled on their perches, hundreds of them, folded into soft round shapes in the dark, their eyes closing slow. Now and then one wakes, opens its wings without a sound, and slips out through an open arch into the moonlight over the grounds, off on some errand of its own, a pale shape crossing the dark and then gone. The rest sleep on, swaying a little where they perch, while the moon comes in through the high windows and lays a band of silver across the floor. And at the very top of the castle, higher than the owlery, higher than anything, the astronomy tower stands open to the whole of the sky. This is the highest point of the school, a wide stone platform under the stars, where, on clear nights, the students bring their telescopes to chart the slow turning of the heavens. The instruments are put away now. The platform is bare, and the wind moves across it cold and clean, and there is nothing between it and the stars but the dark. From up here, the whole castle falls away below, tower and roof and lit window going down into the night, and beyond it the black sheet of the lake, then the dark line of the forest, then the mountains past that, all of it sleeping, all of it small and far down in the dark. Stars are very close up here. They turn overhead the way they have always turned, slow and bright and silent above the sleeping school, and the old tower stands up into them, bare and cold and still, with the whole dark country laid out at its feet. Somewhere in the middle of the castle, a stone courtyard lies open to the sky, walled on every side by the dark bulk of the school. The flagstones are wet with the first of the dew, and the moon stands high over the open square, throwing the long shadows of the arches across the ground. A covered walk runs around the edge of it, column after column, each one holding its own pool of deeper dark. In the daytime, this is a crossing place full of feet and voices, students cutting through from one wing to another. Now there is no one. A little wind moves through the arches and dies away. The old stone gives back the last of the day's warmth to the night air, and the courtyard holds its square of stars, and waits, patient and empty, for the morning to fill it again with noise. Outside, the grounds lie still under the stars. The grass that grew back over the scars of the battle is wet now with the first of the dew. The lake is black and smooth and enormous, holding the moon on its surface without a ripple, and far below, somewhere in the cold dark of the deep water, the great squid drifts slow through the weeds, and the underwater village of the merpeople shows no light at all, its windows dark, its narrow streets empty, its people asleep in their cold stone houses at the bottom of the world. The water keeps its secrets the way it always has. Tonight it only sleeps, and holds the moon, and laps now and again against the shore. Down where the grass runs out and the first trees begin, a low stone hut sits with one warm lamp still burning in its window. It is the only light anywhere out here, a small square of gold against all that dark smoke rising thin and straight from the chimney into the windless night. The man who keeps the grounds lives there, alone but for an enormous dog, and the dog lies stretched out by the banked fire now, twitching after something in its sleep. A kettle sits cooling on the hearth. Outside the door, the great pumpkins he grows swell slowly in the dark of the patch, season after season, larger than barrels. Whatever lives out in the forest beyond, and a great deal does, that one lamp has burned through every kind of night the grounds have known, steady and unbothered, the last small light between the sleeping castle and the wild dark under the trees. At the edge of the grounds the forest stands black against the sky, and the wild things in it have settled too. The herds that move under the trees have lain down in their hidden clearings. The centaurs stand out in the open places, with their faces turned up to the stars they read, saying little, keeping their own long watch on the sky. The winged horses that only the grieving can see have folded their dark wings and bedded down in the deep of the wood. Whatever else lives in there, in the parts of the forest no one has ever walked, keeps to itself tonight. And the old dark beneath the trees, the dark that has frightened the children of the castle for 1,000 years, is only the forest being what it has always been, asleep in its own ancient way at the foot of the school, and over all of it the towers stand. They have stood through 1,000 years of nights like this one, through every dark thing this long telling has carried you past, through the chamber sealed below, and the room full of hidden things, and the long line of headmasters, good and ill, that they came through the battle that nearly brought them down, and the slow years of mending after, and they are standing now. They will be standing in the morning, when the sun comes up cold and clear over the mountains, and the lake turns from black to silver to blue, when the owls come home, and the staircases begin to move, and the first sleepy children come yawning down to the hall for breakfast, under a ceiling, full of morning light. The castle will take up its long day again. It always does. Down by the water the white tomb keeps its place between the lake and the trees, pale in the starlight, at peace. The man inside it gave his whole long life to this school and to the children in it, and asked for nothing at the end but to be left here, in the one place that had ever truly been his home. He has it, the lake laps softly below him, the stars wheel slowly overhead, and the castle he loved goes on, watching over everyone sleeping safe inside its walls, exactly as he would have wanted. Before the night closes over completely, one last small thing, and then I will leave you to your sleep, that, if you have stayed with me all the way through this, through the whole long dark history of the castle, then thank you, sincerely. It means a great deal. If you would like to drift off this way again, you can follow along, so that the next long night finds you without your having to go looking for it. And if there is somewhere you would like me to take you next, some corner of this world you have always wondered about, Leave it for me down in the comments, and I may build the next night around it. That is all. There is nothing you need to do now, only rest. So let the castle keep its watch tonight, the way it has kept it for 1,000 years, and let it watch over you too, here, now, in the warm dark on the soft edge of sleep. There is nothing left in the whole long story that can reach you here. The chamber is sealed, the fire is out. Far off, battle is won and long over. The dead are long at rest, and the school stands whole and still under the turning stars. The work of the night is done. The fires are banked low, the doors are shut, and the children are asleep, and you are nearly asleep along with them, while the great old castle stands around you in the dark, patient and whole and watchful, asking nothing of you at all. Let your breathing slow, the last of the day go. The stairs have stopped moving, the candles have burned low. Outside the lake is still, and the stars are turning over the mountains the way they always do. You are safe. The night is quiet. The castle stands. Rest now. There is nothing left to fear.